Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the VRRC. We hope you enjoyed your Christmas and New Year, and you're back and ready and raring to go with a new championship, a brand new championship here at the VRRC, and one that is going to take us right the way through from one end of 2024 to the other. A brand new initiative, one that I think is a fantastic idea and already has proven hugely popular based on the grid numbers that we're seeing for our opening round of the World Endurance League. We are going GT3 racing, but no sprint championship. This is an 8-round endurance championship, 90-minute races taking us around the world, as the name would suggest, and it all starts tonight with our first round of the championship. Andy McEwen and Jack Oliphant here to talk you through all of the action, with Rich Hayden doing a marvellous job behind the scenes to keep the broadcast going. And Jack, we're here at last. I've really been looking forward to this. Endurance racing is my thing. I love long distance racing. I know that you're partial to it as well. We've got a big grid, some great tracks. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, you've been advocating this for quite some time, haven't you, Andy? About 2 years, I think. And we sort of tested a little bit of endurance here, there, and everywhere. We're trying to bleed people into the slightly more long-distance races, and we've finally thrown them into, not, I wouldn't say the deep end of endurance racing, but certainly the shallow paddling around sort of area of 90-minute races that we got upcoming. And there we go, the calendar are full and fledged out. Like you were saying, Andy, we've got all over the world: Imola, Spa, Le Mans, Sao Paulo, Kota, Fuji, and Bahrain follow, obviously, the opening round here at Qatar. There's a little bit there for everyone. Some proper high-end racing, some proper high-end tracks as well. And speaking of high-end, look at the machinery that these guys can get out there and race. I don't think anybody's taking the Lexus, which is a bit of a shame, but the Mercedes, Lamborghini, and BMW will be roaring around the streets of all of these circuits. And there is even prizes up for grabs, Andy, isn't there? Because, of course, we've got the trophies rolling out and driver of the round medals.
Yes, picking driver of the round isn't going to be easy because long races means that everyone will have a bit of a story to tell at the end of 90 minutes, but we'll do our best, and we will, as always, take some input even from you guys watching at home. So let us know towards the end of the broadcast who you think driver of the race should be. So as we can see, we start and end in the Middle East, and we will start at Qatar, which these days actually is a host circuit for the Formula One World Championship. Opened back in 2004, has a history that really revolves more around two-wheeled motorsport. Actually, it has traditionally become the opening round venue for the MotoGP Championship. A great circuit in cars or bikes, though. It's fast, it's flowing, it's very technically demanding. Quite a long circuit as well, coming in at just over 3.3 miles. That record belonging to some bloke called Max Verstappen from a couple of years ago when Formula One did first visit this fantastic circuit. And we can take a little look now at a lap that might not be quite as fast as a 1:24, but certainly a very quick lap on board one of these fantastic GT3 cars. So, the Losail International Circuit in Qatar, then a really, really challenging venue. This, and our car for the occasion is the Mercedes-AMG GT3. Our chauffeur is Joel Lask, and we're barreling on down the main straight, a long, long main straight into a big braking zone at turn 1. This is definitely the best place to try and launch an attack. All the way down to second gear. The front engine Mercedes loves corners like this, where the car can really rotate. Stay to the right hand side of the road though, into the left hander at turn 2. Nice late apex required, because then we're accelerating flat out through the third turn. Continuing up a slight incline, actually, doesn't really show too much from on board, but we are heading uphill here into two 90-degree right-handers at turns 4 and 5. If you're really feeling brave, you could try and have a go on the inside into the first of those two, but really the best place to overtake in this section is here at turn 6, down into first gear. Slight bit of camber in the road there as well to help turn the car. Definitely a good place to try and stick it up the inside. Then we head to turn 7 and into one of my favourite sequences of corners on the track. We've got the flat-out left-hander here at turn 8, and then you flick it into a 90-degree right-hander at turn 9. Hook the curb, widen the angle into the right-hander, really use the curb on the inside, and then straight back over to the right-hand side of the road, onto the brakes, and into turn number 10. A tricky left-hander that opens up on exit. Flat out through turn number 11. It's not really a corner, really. You're easily flat out through there, but again, stay to the left-hand side of the road into one of the most iconic corners on the track. It's actually 3 corners, turn 12, 13, and then 14. None of them are quite flat out. There's a little bit of a break actually there, down a gear into third for turn number 14, before heading into another one of these sort of mid-speed 90-degree left-handers at turn 15. Heading downhill towards the final turn. You can try and get up the inside here, but really it's corner exit speed that is far more important, because this leads you onto the long drag past the pits. The pit lane will be seeing some use during the race as well, which is always a part of endurance racing. Flat out past the pits, and a lap completed around the Losail International Circuit. So that is the circuit, and as we saw there, Jack, it is a technically demanding one. Lots of those sort of second, third gear corners. Not the easiest of places to overtake at, but you've got 90 minutes to try and make some progress and find a way past the cars around you. And there are places where if you're feeling brave, you can have a go. So I'm intrigued to see what sort of racing we get here, and how many of these drivers going off into turn 1 for the first time. Remember, this is not a 20-minute sprint race.
Yeah, that is somewhat of the fear, isn't it? That I think Rich Hayden is feeling as what will be the steward. As post-race judicials obviously get handed out, as this is a championship, but hopefully everybody sort of keeps on their best behaviour and remembers what exactly we're fighting for. At the moment, the pole position is fought very closely, isn't it? Look at the top on your left-hand side there. It's Nicky Taylor and Joel Lask. No, there isn't actually. There's Smith in between. Joel Lask is actually in third place, but according to my timing screen, Jack Smith is in third. There we go, it's just updated itself. Now, Jack Smith is in second place. I was getting very confused there, Andy. Just a tenth of a second separates them almost, but Nicky Taylor is certainly throwing his weight around here. He's maybe done some, quite a few laps, I imagine.
Yeah, we think of Nicky as more of a front-wheel drive specialist, really, but taking to the rear-wheel drive Mercedes really well. Here is Jack Smith returning, didn't race with us in our Porsche Championship, but he's back in the Beamer, of course, our brand that he's had so much success with in recent past here at the VRRC in the touring cars, but DK Power livery looking good, I have to say. They've outdone themselves with the liveries this time, haven't they? Yeah. So many good, really good-looking cars out on the grid. The good news is, over 90 minutes, plenty of time to take a look at them. Now, this, Jack, is a driver I'm fascinated to watch tonight. Ben Smith dominated the GT4 Cayman class in our Porsche Championship, but all season long, really, we were sort of teasing him, saying, well, you know, how quick do you think you'd be in a GT3 spec car? Well, now we get the chance to find out, and the answer is pretty quick. Yeah, well, we didn't really expect anything less of him, I suppose, did we? But we were very conscious of the fact that we didn't know how competitive he'd be compared to everybody else. And you're right, we have teased him quite a lot. Hopefully I can put my boring one way or the other questions to one side for the time being, because we might have some more interesting stuff to actually talk to him about. He's very, very close. Oh, he's almost very close to a spinning car on the outside there. Who is that? I think it's Kenny Press, isn't it? So, yeah, he's looking very sort of quick. A few improvements here, there, and everywhere. Nicky Taylor's just gone green in sector 2. Jack Smith sector 1. Joel Last sector 3. Ben Smith is not setting a valid lap time this time round, but Craig Curtis has just gone green in sector 1 and 2. Nicky Taylor's just gone purple in sector 3, so there is still time out there, Andy, even though they've been rotating for about 15 minutes of this 20-minute qualifying session. I think the top 5 with Jonathan Ogden and Tom Churchhouse actually in 6th place looks very interesting indeed. Yeah, a couple of new names out there, aren't there? Obviously, Ben Smith, we're sort of getting used to seeing now, but yeah, Jonathan Ogden and Tom Churchhouse, 2 brand new names to the VRRC, and both inside the top 6. Now, because they're new, they won't be carrying a huge amount of driver ballast, because remember, there are 2 systems in the VRRC when it comes to calculating ballast. You've got success ballast based on your results within a specific championship. So after this first round, we'll start to apply championship success ballast. That equates to half of the ballast calculations. The other half comes down to your driver ranking within the VRRC community. And of course, those drivers who are brand new, well, we've no data to go off, so they come in with no ballast as far as their driver ranking. And of course, with this being in the opening round of the championship, no success ballast either. So they do have a small advantage in that way, but still looking mightily competitive in the early stages, as though is Nicky Taylor. Nicky Taylor was 3/10 quicker than Jack Smith. Jack himself has just managed to find a small improvement, but Taylor's going quicker again. He found 2/10 on his previous lap, Jack, and he's already gone green again in sector 1. The body language of that car is very aggressive indeed, isn't he? He's chucking it all over the place. Track limits are almost starting to become into question, because he's all over the inside, he's all over the outside. He's using as much track as humanly possible to try and get the time out of it, isn't it? But it is very entertaining to watch, I have to say, by Nicky Taylor as he rounds out the final corner. What is he going to be able to muster? He's gone purple sector 3 last time round. What is the sector 3 going to be this time? As he's gone green in sector 1, I think it's potentially going to be a touch slower for Nicky Taylor. He comes across the line, and it's not an improvement this time, so Jackson gets to have another go as Eric Axelson's just gone green in sector 1. In fact, everybody's pretty much improving at some point over the course of their lap. Kai Kagashiwa and Josh Martin, 18th and 19th, going green. Another new driver of Julian Alwendy is in 24th place. Not yet set a legal time, I don't think, but is currently putting in 2 greens. Not hard when you haven't set time yet. No, that's a very good point. We've got a couple of other new names down there as well. Case Willems, Adam Lyle, Lee Piercy. It's so nice, isn't it, actually, to see lots of new names out on track, and we'll see more of them, I'm sure, as the night goes on. Now, Eric Axelson, we know, is good in rear-wheel drive GT machinery. He's languishing down in 8th place at the moment, but as we head into the final 3 minutes of the session, Jack, he is finding chunks of time. It's coming at the potential risk of exceeding track limits, but green in sector 1, purple sector 2, Eric Axelson's on a mission. Yeah, we'll have to wait and see whether he comes across the line, whether the actual lap is valid or not, because it did look a little bit questionable on the outside, but as he screams that Lambo all the way down the straight, what's he got in the locker? Is it top 5 pace? It's top 6 pace, not quite able to crack in ahead of Jonathan Ogden, but he does separate the 2 new guys that we were talking about earlier. I'm quite impressed
with Craig Curtis in 8th place. Actually, he's now in 8th place. He was in 7th for quite some time until Eric then pipped him. He's ahead of Chris Blakey, actually, ahead of a lot of drivers we expect to be quite high up. Oliver Gibson, Elliot Daltonez, to name a few, Josh Martin, of course. So it's quite impressive by those guys to be really operating very close to the top end of the field.
That's a very good point, actually, Jack. And yeah, certainly people like Elliot Daltonez and Oliver Gibson, you'd expect to see further towards the pointy end, wouldn't you? I mean, Oliver Gibson's teammate, Jack Smith, is second fastest and just went purple in the middle sector. Here he is looking towards the end of the lap. A bit of traffic there. That's Ben Smith, I think, getting out of the way just in front of him. The DK Power BMW turns through the final corner. He will have one more lap after this if he wants it. Very wide coming out of the final turn. Surely he can't find over a quarter of a second that he needs for pole position, but this could be a new personal best lap. Across the timing line he goes, and a big build-up in the end. Doesn't manage to find any time, but Jack Smith not giving in here and pushing hard to the end. But yeah, people like Oliver Gibson and Elliot Daltonez particularly, Jack, I'm surprised at, because this is his thing, isn't it? Rear-wheel drive, GT cars. We saw how quick he went in the GT Championship that we did actually in Sprint Racing GT Championship a little while ago. He was a title contender there and a regular race winner, but so far tonight can't quite unlock that pace.
Yeah, I think that's actually more of a testament to Nicky Taylor potentially, maybe trying to push himself to become a little bit more of an all-round driver rather than a front-wheel drive touring car specialist, as we sort of donned on him before. Here is Ben Smith. Joel Lask also went quicker on that previous lap, by the way. His fastest is obviously less than 2/10 away from Jack Smith, so the top three really are sort of gapped quite substantially. And in fact, actually, you have to go a little bit further back to Ben Smith as well. So really, it's not as close as maybe we would expect. But over such a long circuit, Andy, maybe this is what we come to expect. We're so used to touring cars, aren't we? We're so used to Civics and Minis and whatever else we get handed to us, and then all of a sudden we get GTs 2/10 of a second over a massive circuit like this. Actually, is pretty close.
Nearly a 2-minute lap, so yeah, that's not bad, really, is it? 2/10. And the other thing is that, you know, qualifying pace in a 20-minute race is of much more significance than it is ahead of a 90-minute race. One thing I'm noticing about particularly the Mercedes, but I'm sure some of the other cars this is true of as well, they're really sliding the cars through the corners. It seems that that's the fast way to get the car to turn through the corners, but that is not going to work over a full race distance in a 90-minute race. You're going to burn out those rear tyres very quickly, so the cars that are quick in qualifying might not remain so in the race. Now, Ben Smith going quickly here, 2 personal best sectors. Can he get himself onto the front row with this last-ditch effort across the line? Yes, he can! Yeah. Second fastest for Ben Smith. What a fantastic lap that was. Our reigning GT4 class champion in the Porsche series, a quarter of a second off pole position and on the front row. Who'd have thought it?
Very, very impressive indeed, actually, on that one last lap ditch attempt. Eric Axelsson with 2 green sectors. Oh, yeah, 2 green sectors to his name. No, actually, that's Tom Churchhouse. Eric's only got 1. Andy Carroll's just got an improvement as well. He's made his way up to 9th place. Churchhouse has finished his qualified just ahead of Eric Axelsson. He's one of the few drivers left to complete the lap in this 7th place currently. Can he jump into that top 5? Well, he's coming around the final corner, Andy, and Craig Curtis is in the pits or he's off the circuit or something. He's not going to be able to improve, so it is all eyes on Eric Axelsson. Across the line, jumps into that top 5 position just about. He gets ahead of Jonathan Ogden and Tom Churchhouse, and he'll be fairly pleased with that one. He can race from there, I'm sure. Craig Curtis is off the track, so I think it's about that time we go to a quick break before we come back and have a chat to our pole position.
Welcome back, everybody. A very entertaining qualifying session complete for our first ever round of the World Endurance League here at Qatar. And we've got our first pole sitter of the season, Nikki Taylor, who has set a phenomenal lap, it must be said there, to go just over a quarter of a second faster in the end than anybody else. And Nikki joins us now in the commentary box. Nikki, well done. Fantastic effort. Did you expect to have that much pace in hand over the rest?
Not particularly. I've been bedbound for most of the day, so I think I come on the server about just before briefing. So I haven't done a lot, but yeah, just thought I'd try something with a setup at the end of practice, and I went about a second a lap quicker with just changing it. So yeah, I kept it, and then yeah, I was on for about a 52.8 at one point and screwed it a little bit, but yeah, luckily enough, the 53 depth was good enough.
That's interesting then. So you found a chunk of time, but is that something that you think you can translate into the race? Because obviously it's not a 20-minute sprint race this. You've got to mind the tyres, you've got to think about fuel strategy as well. So how close to that pace do you think you can realistically run in the race?
I don't really know because I haven't been able to do any race practice or anything, so I'm kind of going in blind. I've literally, whenever I've come on the server, I've done about 5-10 lap stints and just done quali runs, so I haven't thought about this bit yet. I know the fuel situation, and I know the tyres aren't the best over a distance, but yeah, we'll have to see. I'm not normally the best one at endurance races, but with the speed I showed in quali, I should be hopefully okay.
What he's saying, everyone, is that if he wins this race, it's going to be all the more impressive by the sound of it. But Nikki, you've certainly got some strong pace. We'll wish you the very best of luck. We'll let you go and finish off your preparations. I'm sure there's a few things for you to be tweaking before the race starts, but a fantastic start to the season. And hopefully we'll speak to you again later on this evening.
Hopefully so.
So Nikki Taylor, pole position, and well, perhaps not in the most confident mood, actually, for once, but we'll see. Drivers have a habit sometimes of just underplaying their chances, particularly at the start of a season. We'll have to wait and see how he gets on in the race later on. Right then, in the meantime, whilst they're gridding up and getting ready to go, we can tell you about a little bit of the racing action that you're going to see in the near future here at the VRRC. It's not just endurance racing this year, don't you worry. We're going to be squeezing these endurance races in between our regular 8-week sprint racing championships, and the first of those will be back to front-wheel drive tin tops, but in the shape of the Mini JCW Cup, an 8-week championship that will take us to all four corners of the United Kingdom, and actually slightly beyond, because we're making, I think, maybe our first ever visit to Mondello Park. We're racing at Anglesey, Castle Combe, some really interesting circuits on this calendar. Can't wait, Jack. Oh, we've lost Jack. Hopefully he will be back.
Yes, I am here. I was finishing my garlic bread.
I
don't think I've ever commentated on anything at Mondello Park, so that's going to be really exciting. The Mini's obviously back to a little bit of almost touring car action, aren't we, really? It's and I think after a couple of rounds of endurance racing, a lot of these drivers will be looking forward to it and pretty excited. So hopefully everybody at home is as well. It should be a really exciting format with the long endurance championship sort of splitting up the others, so it should be really fun. But that's not all we've got here at VRRC, of course. And there is the form. Oh, in fact, actually, we've got to go through the prizes first. My apologies. The CAMMUS Simulation Direct Drive Wheel is, of course, the first place prize, as it has been for a couple of our most recent seasons, as well as the second place being that. It's an onboard dash, isn't it, Andy? You've seen this before. You've been sort of talking about it before.
Yeah, I really want one of those. Well, I want most of these things, actually, but that is a particularly useful addition, I think, to a sim racing setup. And then you've also got the Mecha gear shifter, which also looks like a lot of fun. And fourth and fifth place drivers in the championship will receive some VRRC teamwear. That's the driver of the round award as well. So lots to play for in the Mini JCW Cup, and that will be beginning in just a couple of weeks' time. Now, if you like your racing a little bit less on the serious side, then perhaps the Formula Mirror League will be more up your street. This is another new initiative for 2024, a series of single-seater races that will run sort of alongside, or mirroring, if you will, the real-world Formula One calendar. And we're not racing all of the the 327 Formula One rounds this year, but we will have a 12 race championship that will start at Saudi Arabia and run all the way through to Abu Dhabi in December. So if you like single-seater racing, something we don't often see a huge amount of here at the VRRC, then the Formula Mirror League might be a little bit more up your street. 25-minute races, race 2 full reverse grid, as we're used to seeing, and entry is free for VRRC members, and for non-members, £10 per round. If you have to miss a week, don't worry. Realise it's quite a long championship, so there is one dropped round included, and the top 3 in the championship at the end of the season will have some trophies in the post to them. So that's the Mirror League. We've also, as always, got our Time Attack series running year long. And, well, we're moving into, fittingly actually, the world of GT cars. We have, for the first round, which started on the 8th of January, in fact, we're nearly at the end of only 5 days to go before round 1 concludes, the Alpine A1110 GT4. Then on the 22nd of January, we move to the Aston Martin GT3. The BMW M2 GT2 will take over from that. And then one of my all-time favourite racing cars, the Porsche 911 GT1 from the 90s for round 4 beginning on the 19th of February. Each car will have a different track as well. We go from Monaco to Las Vegas to Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps, and then the iconic Circuit de la Sarthe at Le Mans for the final round. It's all about hot lapping. Whoever sets the fastest time will win, and there are prizes for each Time Attack round as well. So if you like hot lapping and you like GT cars and you like the sound of barreling around Monaco in an Alpine GT4, then the Time Attack is for you. Right, I think that's all the church notices done, Jack. We're almost ready to go racing for our first round of the World Endurance League, and a fascinating grid that we've got after the qualifying session earlier on. We're, I think, about 3 minutes or so away from getting this 90-minute race underway. Well, interesting to talk strategy here, I think. It's one of the reasons that I love endurance racing, and we are hearing we're going to be seeing at least one, but probably 2 pit stops from each driver, not necessarily because of the fuel, but because of the high tyre wear. And that kind of goes back to what I said in qualifying. It looks like the cars are sliding around quite a lot of low grip surface, and we know from our experiences in Assetto Corsa that looking after the tyre wear, but also the tyre temperature, that is the key, and that's not going to be easy tonight, is it?
No, I think the tyre temperature is almost more important than anything else, isn't it, other than the slip and everything. So it's going to be hard work for these drivers because we haven't done many long distance running before. Nicky Taylor was just saying, obviously, that he was not very confident and he hasn't done much practice. And obviously, if we've never raced this kind of thing before, that does mean we are going into a bit of the unknown. So even the likes of the Eric Axelsons of the world, who are maybe very smooth, obviously in the cars, we've commented on that a lot with Eric Axelson. He might be playing the long game. He might be able to eke out a couple of laps here and there. He might be able to use older tyres a little bit better. So we might see a couple of people fly off and then obviously be reeled back in as their tyres go down. So it's going to be very, very interesting. I know, Andy, that you are fascinated by all this sort of thing, as it looks like almost a wheel spin there for Elliot Dalton there, although I think that's a little bit of a glitch because that would be reverse wheel spin, something that's not really advised on the start of the line. And I mentioned it in qualifying earlier, Andy. A couple of drivers to be shouting out: Craig Curtis, Andy Cowell, Chris Blakey. It is very good for them to be in the top 10, which we don't often see in other championships.
Yeah, Chris Blakey in particular, really impressed with that because he was sort of a regular podium finisher within the GT4 class of our Porsche Championship, wasn't he? But admittedly, that was a fairly small grid, sometimes 4 or 5 cars on the grid from week to week. So it's nice now that he's getting the chance to really prove what he can do and qualifying inside the top 10. And I think anyone qualifying inside the top 10 will feel realistically that they've got half a chance of getting into the top 5 by the end of the race. If you don't have the outright pace to go and chase after someone like Nicky Taylor or Jack Smith at the front, then just bide your time, stay out of trouble, look after the tyres, and you never know, you could find yourself in a position for a good result at the end of the race. We'll have a standing start, which I know is not typical of GT racing, so that's perhaps not a bad thing though, actually, Jack. It reduces the speed at which they'll arrive at the first corner, and as we've touched upon, that can sometimes be a flashpoint, can't it?
I think it's probably the sensible thing to do. Hopefully the drivers have actually practiced getting these cars off the line. I think we have raced them before, though, haven't we, in a sprint championship? We've raced all kinds of GT cars now. I can't actually remember if we've raced these exact models, but fingers crossed nobody will stall it, and everyone will be sensible going into turns 1 and 2, because of course they are quite long and free flowing, but they are an overtaking opportunity, or at least T1 is. So it's going to be interesting. Hopefully the likes of Ben Smith, Joel Last don't decide to go for an all or nothing move into turn 1, because that could be the danger, and then that sparks off the contact behind.
Yeah, no heroics into turn 1 has never been advice more worthy of listening to, has it? 24 drivers, 90 minutes on the clock. The opening round of the World Endurance League then about to kick off here at the Losail International Circuit. The red lights are on, and Nicky Taylor will look to try and get the perfect launch in his Mercedes-AMG GT3. Away we go, we're racing in 2024 here at the VRRC, and Nicky Taylor will hold on to the early advantage there. One car on the grass further back. Jack Smith did not get off the line particularly well, and he could get swamped into turn number 1. It's side by side for second place. Ben Smith defending that inside line, and yeah, Jack Smith has gone wide and dropped down into 6th position. Oulton is up into 4th place after a demon start at the Mercedes. It's an AMG 1, 2, 3, 4, as they all largely, Jack, seem to have negotiated the first few corners in one piece.
I think it's safe to assume that Ogden is a teammate of Ben Smith, given the fact that the liveries are so close together. So that is meaning that Joel Last is slightly ganged up on here, isn't he? But Nicky Taylor got the dream start he was hoping for. Even though he might not be confident of the long distance running, I'm sure he'll be happy to see himself in first place with all that clean air in front of him. Leave the rest of them to fight it over. I don't know there's much contact. We do have a few drivers that are somewhat struggling in the background. I think that is Lee Piercy and John Jones. Lee Piercy, of course, one of the new drivers that we have to the championship. There they are trying to recover. Unfortunately, it's maybe a little bit of contact a little bit further back. But the top 4 certainly and the midfield look very interesting indeed.
Does indeed. The 4 Mercedes then at the front of the pack. Axelson sits, no, sorry, it's not Ogden, excuse me, sitting in 5th place, isn't it? The other green Lamborghini. Where is Eric? Axel. Oh, Axel's showing us the lead. I don't think that's quite right. No, he is there in 5th position. Then Smith in 6th. Tyler was just going haywire for a moment. Gibson 7th. So he's had a decent start right at the tail, actually, of his DK Racing teammate. In fact, really applying the pressure to Jack Smith in the background, but the top 5 getting away. And for whatever reason, Jack Smith just does not have the pace on cold tyres. Now, is this a genuine lack of pace, or is this Jack Smith just biding his time and not getting tempted into setting purple sectors right from the off?
I'll tell you what it is. It's a family argument waiting to happen. Because Gibson is right on the gearbox of of Jack Smith, isn't it? I keep wanting to say Ben Smith. Is there a potential change for the... No, I thought there was a Joel Lask attempt on Ben Smith there, but I think he's just dropped back in. So this is almost separated the top 5, isn't it, Andy? With Axelson trying to hang on to the likes of Ogden, Lask, Smith and Taylor. And then Gibson back is starting to become a little bit of a trade. If you look, there's the top 4, then Axelson, in no man's land. Then it's Gibson back to fight for 7th place.
Yeah, well, really sick, isn't he? Jack Smith's the one who's struggling. Gibson sort of bottled up behind his teammates. And yeah, you're right, the queue forming behind. But right now, the 4 AMG's looking strong. Mistake there, though, for Joel Last. Just outbraked himself slightly into the left-hander. Did that allow Jonathan Ogden to get the run? It did not. So the second of the man filter livery cars stays in behind. I do love that livery. I mean, I'm owner of a couple of reptiles myself, and so that immediately I'm attracted to a livery like that. But that is one of my favourite real world GT liveries. A team I think based out in Germany that runs those cars. It's a very, very good looking car indeed. So is this one, certainly a distinctive livery, and that is Adam Lyle nipping up the inside on a struggling Josh Martin.
It is indeed, yeah, and Josh actually is a bit of a talking point here, because every so often he does this at the early stages of championships and pops up towards the end, but the problem he's going to have if that is his tactic is the fact that this World Endurance League is strung out over so many months that you're not really going to build up any kind of momentum, and practice is pretty key. Dalton Ayres, I love it. I am quite enjoying that livery as well, actually, with Dalton Ayres. It looks like he's already made bumping contact with Oliver Gibson, because it looks like the paint has run off onto his lights of the pink BMW in front of you. But it's a very nice looking car, it has to be said. And Nicky Taylor is somewhat streaking away with this, isn't it? With I would say streaking away, he's just got a nice gap at the moment. But do you think that's more Ben Smith biding his time and just happy that he's where he is at the moment?
I suspect so, honestly. I don't really think there's any sense in sort of tapping Morse code on the rear bumper of Nicky Taylor's car right now. Just run to a pace at the moment. If you're comfortably keeping up the race lead, and that's more than enough at this stage. We have an hour and 25 minutes still to go. So after the tyres, bed yourself in and save the racing for later on. I mean, because we have a couple of pit stops planned over the course of the 90 minutes, you don't even have to overtake Nicky on the track. You could potentially try something like undercut when we get into pit stop time, because it does sound like the tyres are going to need to quite a drop off in lap time. So stay within a second or so of the leader. You've got a chance to find a way through a bit later on. Very impressed there, Jack, with how close everybody is running right now. I know we've got that bit of a gap actually now forming between Oulton 4th and Axelson 5th, but everybody else in a long train. It really does look like a real GT3 race. This doesn't it? Got a big grid, a nice mix of cars, and no one right now streaking away.
I don't really know why Rich has taken so long to implement this championship. Actually, the standard of driving, and such wood, is high right now. Well, it has been for the first 6 minutes. We have got an hour and 24 to go, but right now it is looking rather impressive. And you're right, it does look like a real endurance championship. And Mercedes, BMW sort of splitting the pack as well. It's quite good. But we just mentioned Josh Martin before. I've just had a quick look at the YouTube chat, and if anybody's a fan of any driver excuses, Andy, you've been told to check your messages because there's apparently a corker from Josh Martin in there somewhere, which might be why he's a little bit further down the order. So I'll give you a second to try and find out what his latest excuse is to add to the book that is his encyclopedia at this point. But Andy Cowell, as you can see, is maybe just dropping off the back of Elliot Dalton there. So maybe Craig Curtis is having an idea of having a go into turn 1. And I think Craig Curtis is actually quite keen on that. Dives to the inside, a good little move inside the top 10.
And just ahead of them, Elliot Daltonaire's having a go at Oliver Gibson as well. They're side by side into turn 2. Daltonaire's had the inside for turn 1. He's trying to go right round the outside at turn 2. What a fabulous bit of driving that was. Bit of a hit check on the exit. They are still door to door through the flat out right-hander at turn 3. But now we've got the 2 right-handers at 4 and 5. They will favour Elliot Daltonaire's, who gains a position at the expense of Oliver Gibson. So Gibson, who in the early stages, Jack, looked quicker than his teammates. Actually, Jack Smith in front of him. He's dropped back. He's lost a place. He might now lose a second as well, because Craig Curtis is interested in getting through on the inside line. That did not quite work, but a lovely bit of racing between the two of them. Elliot Daltonaire's, having got part of the job done at turn 1, did not back down despite finding himself on the outside of turn 2.
It was very nice indeed, actually, wasn't it? And what's your betting to say that if this was a sprint race, there'd be a bit more contact in there, Randy?
Well, yes, you might be onto something there. They did keep it relatively clean, tiny bit of contact maybe on the exit of turn 2, but not too bad. And that is one of the nice things about endurance racing. You know, I know they're all racing drivers. I know they all want to fight for every position, and because they're so evenly matched, you have got to be a little bit cutthroat about it. But, you know, if you do have someone really attacking you, putting you under pressure, risking a bit of contact, you don't have to fight them at every corner. You can just choose to almost move aside, let them go, and just try and tag along with them. Although Oliver Gibson not able to do that, Elliot Daltonaire's is now showing some real pace, isn't he? Up into 7th position, and already, I would say, starting to bridge the gap between the two DK Power BMWs.
Yeah, sorry, I was just having a look at the YouTube chat, actually, and just relaying a bit of Dave's information to Rich, but apparently they're already on it. So yeah, the gap between the BMWs and the top 5, or top 4, sorry, is really starting to build out, isn't it? Where is Eric Axelson, though? I'm not sure, Andy, if that was what you were just referring to. I do apologise if it was, but Eric does seem to have... He's not even on the screen, is he, anymore? In terms of the top 5, in top 4,
place.
sorry, he's quite some distance, 3.7 seconds back. And look, you're right into the clutches of Jack Smith.
Hanging on my every word, eh, Jack? Yes, Axelson dropping back for whatever reason. And yeah, Jack Smith now looks a little bit pacey, but Nicky Taylor doesn't, does he really? And the more laps that we put in here, we're nearly 9 minutes into the race, but the more laps we put in, the worse Nicky Taylor looks, and the more antsy, perhaps, Ben Smith is looking about trying to find a way through. He's got pressure from Joel Lask, never a nice thing to have, and he will want to try and make a move here on Nicky Taylor, I think, before too much longer. I've noticed a few times, Jack, that Ben Smith has taken a bit of an early apex, kind of diving at the apex of the corner, trying to just distract and apply the pressure to Nicky Taylor. The best place to do it, though, surely, is on that long drag into turn 1, and I would not be surprised if we see a challenge down there within the next lap or so.
Yes, well, I've been listening to you this time, Andy, and I agree. And, yeah, I do agree. To be honest, jokes aside, it's a little bit dropped off a touch there. Maybe this is the problem, isn't it, with lining up a mover? You can almost try and be a little bit too clever. You can try and line it up at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 turns in advance. But the problem is, if you keep diving for the early apex, if you keep trying to play the mind games, you actually lose the speed. If Nicky Taylor doesn't actually succumb to the mind games, all of a sudden the opportunity's gone, as I think it has here for Ben Smith. So maybe he needs to think a little bit further ahead, maybe start trying to press those moves and put that pressure on a little bit further into the lap, so he can then charge it up to be within touching distance going into turn 1. It's a lot of learning here. We haven't raced Qatar before, so I think it's going to be interesting to see if that is going to be the case, or whether or not Ben Smith just wasn't thinking about the move just yet at all, and he was still, again, quite happy just sitting in the slipstream and letting Nicky Taylor punch a hole in the air for him as Nicky goes very wide once more. Just having a look at the lap times, actually, between the top 4 and the rest of the field, and as I say that, my screen has gone dead. So Andy, I will get back to you on the lap times in a second, but I wanted to see how far everybody else off was compared to these top 4. Axelsen keeps dropping away and is actually only within half a second of Jack Smith now.
Well, on the previous lap, Axelsen was the best part of 6/10 slower than Ogden ahead of him. Ogden doing really well, actually, to more or less hang on to the tail of this leading group. It's now nearly 4 seconds between 4th and 5th places, so Eric Axelsen definitely struggling for whatever reason. He is the first non-Mercedes. Now, Jack, we've made it 11 minutes into this race. We haven't mentioned BOP. I think it's probably about time we had this discussion. Yes, sure. there is balance of performance in this championship. I can assure you that that's been painstakingly worked on by the team behind the scenes. However, it is only natural that certain circuits will favour certain cars. We've got, in the Mercedes and the BMW, front-engine cars. The Lamborghini, which gets very wayward there in the hands of Eric Axelsen, is a mid-engined car. And exactly what we saw there, that little bit of tail happiness, can sometimes be an issue in the mid-speed corners for a mid-engine car. So I think this is just one of those tracks that will naturally favour the front-engine cars. Axelsen clearly on the ropes here and under pressure, I think, heading towards turn 1. That, meanwhile, is not the ideal line for Tom Churchhouse, that is, isn't it? Who's off into the gravel, and that had all the look, Jack, of some sort of hardware issue.
Yeah, well, Churchhouse is doing really well. Speaking of doing a little bit better, though, Jack Smith is up the inside of Eric Axelsen. A move that he has been lining up, and after the Lamborghini has been driving a little bit too Italian, shall we say. It's a bit too flamboyant over the last lap or two. It has now succumbed to being overtaken and demoted down into 6th place. That lap also won't have helped the tyres at all, will it, Andy? So I think, although we quite often think of Eric as a very smooth driver, somebody who can look after their tyres for a long amount of time, doesn't seem to have translated here today. Churchhouse is a bit of a shame because, again, one of those drivers that was fairly new to brand new to the championship, brand new to VRRC, he has now retired, which maybe he thought, okay, I've had 11 minutes and I've had my turn. Off I go. I don't want to do the last hour and 17. But he qualified really well, didn't he? So it's a bit of a shame to see, not to see how his race develops from here on. So the only newcomer we've got actually in the top 10 is now Jonathan Ogden, even.
Yes, you're right, actually. We had a couple of...
I know, it happens every so often.
Yes, I did try and disguise the shock in my voice then, Jack. I do apologise. Shame that for Churchhouse, who had clearly some very good pace. He didn't get the memo. He thought this was another 20-minute sprint race championship, and he's not down for this. I'm sure that's not the issue, and Tom, we hope we'll have you back for round 2 in a week's time. Now, this lead group, Jack, I hasten to call it a lead battle because I do think there's an element to follow the leader right now, but we're perhaps about to test that theory because Ben Smith is closer than he's ever been at this part of the circuit, less than 3/10 of the gap. He's in the slipstream. He's got a chance, maybe, to have a go into turn 1 if he wishes. Yeah,
coming out of the corner, actually, and to the line, somehow Nicky Taylor actually pulled on Ben Smith, even though Ben Smith had that slipstream, but maybe there was just a difference in... right, we just got word from Rich that there is a setup changes that you can make here. So Ben may be playing with a lot of higher downforce compared to Nicky Taylor, who might be going for that sort of slippery straight line speed advantage, which, I mean, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, Andy, isn't it? But realistically, if Nicky Taylor is just going for that straight line speed, it does mean that he is going to be fairly safe from any late lunge attacks.
Ooh, we say as we see a late lunge attack from the driver's eye view there of Ben Smith, again taking that nice early apex. That would make a lot of sense, though, actually, that Ben Smith perhaps is using a bit more downforce, has a slightly higher downforce setting, because he really excels through the first 2/3 of the lap, where we do have a lot of corners coming at you in quite quick succession. And that explains why he's got the confidence to dive into the corner nice and early, whereas Nicky is taking these wide, smooth, open lines. You'll know a little bit about this, I'm sure, Jack, as a former professional racing driver yourself, but when you don't have those high downforce levels, you have to be a bit more tentative on corner entry, don't you?
You do, and if you really want to break it down and you want an actual professional racing driver, I'm sure I could text my brother, get his view on it. But yeah, you do. It is quite hard work to sort of be in Ben Smith's position, I would say, because you do have such. You want to attack in certain places, and Ben will be actually really held up right now by Nicky Taylor. He could probably go another tenth or two quicker through to sector 1 and 2. The problem is he's never going to have that opportunity. Speaking of Tom, actually, it sort of does remind me a little bit of watching him over in Australia just got recently, where the Lincoln Co was very quick through the twisty stuff, basically, the turns and everything like that. But then he couldn't overtake this Hyundai because it was absolutely rapid in a straight line. He just could not get near it. So every time he was within a shooting distance by the end of the straight, going into the only overtaking point, he's just been pulled by 2 or 3 car lengths. And if Ben Smith is going to suffer with that, it's going to be a bit of a long race. He's going to have to play the long game, isn't he? With the tyre degradation and everything like that, he's going to have to be very sensible, Ben Smith, and try and not let it get to him.
Jack finding any excuse to remind us all that he's just had a nice little trip to the other side of the world, which we're not jealous of one little bit. But Rich actually in our ear makes a very valid point as well. That lower downforce setup is going to lead to more movement of the car, and that will increase tyre wear as well. So if that is the case for Nicky Taylor, we are sort of guessing at this a little bit, but based on the evidence we've got in front of us, that could be the case. And he's way wide of the apex there, heading through the right-hander. That was up at turn number 7. Heading through the left-hander at 8 into 9, and this is where, if you do have a bit more downforce on your car, it's really going to show, and Ben Smith is now starting to apply the pressure. We've spoken a lot, Jack, in this race so far about the merit of not perhaps going on the attack and just logging laps and staying with the leader, but if Ben Smith believes he's got the pace to get away here and sort of pull the pin, if you will, then there's every incentive to try and get this move done and get it done quickly.
Well, absolutely. If he can get it done, and then of course, let's say he can get it done into turn 1, which would be the best position for him to do it, because then he has 2 sections of the lap where he can really push on. He'd probably get a really nice gap, and that would be essential, because as soon as they start going onto the long straights and the wider bits of the circuit, Nicky Taylor will start coming back at him. But if Ben Smith is really as quick as we think he is through the first 2 sectors, he should be able to pull out enough of a gap to maybe stave off that attack from Nicky Taylor. But as I said, the biggest problem is actually going to be getting past him in the first place. I like the idea you mentioned earlier about the tactics, Andy. The undercut, the overlap, there's so many ways that Ben Smith can play this. Maybe he's waiting to see what Nicky Taylor does, because of course, different drivers will keep hold of their tyres differently. There's no set, okay, this is going to be exactly the lap everybody has to come in on. No. They can have a little bit of play with it.
Well, that's the thing. We're saying 2 pit stops. It's not 2 mandatory pit stops.
No.
They will have to pit once for fuel. That much we're fairly certain of. But the second stop, and the timing, actually, of both stops, if you make 2, is all down to tyres. Now, the logical part of my brain says, well, you'd pit every half an hour or so. You could go a couple of minutes either side of that if you wanted to. But they may not do that. They may try and stretch it and then have a shorter final stint where you perhaps have some slightly fresher tyres. That's an issue for Chris Blakey, though. We'll get back to the tyre talk in a moment, because Chris Blakey, who qualified at the back of the top 10, is sadly down to 14th and looked there, Jack, to be recovering from a spin.
Yeah, that is a big shame, actually, because we're bigging up Chris Blakey, and I was enjoying seeing him doing quite well, and you never know, he might come back. We have got a long way to go yet, but Andy Carroll against Oliver Gibson is only a battle we can say has happened a handful of times at the VRRC, I would say, Andy, if you would agree with me. With the touring cars, every so often we see Andy Carroll just pop up out of nowhere and be absolutely rapid. He looks quick here today, and Oliver Gibson doesn't look quite on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Andy Carroll, we're hearing, has done an awful lot of practice as well before the start of the season, really trying to put some effort into this World Endurance League. And right now, he's putting some real effort into finding a way past the first from his perspective, of the DK Power Racing BMWs. The other one, Jack Smith, is several seconds up the road now. Remember, only 20 minutes ago or so, Oliver Gibson was right on the rear bumper of his teammate, and suddenly that is no longer the case. Andy Carroll's not quite able to get within striking range. The lead gap, by the way, down to just 1/10 of a second as they head for turn one, and this is Ben Smith's opportunity. He's got the overlap, he's got the inside line, he's late on the brakes, and Ben Smith leads the race. Fantastic stuff. Joel Last looking to try and go with him, and all of a sudden we have some real action at the front of the pack. Ben Smith through to the lead. It happened as we predicted at turn one. He was just a car length or so closer, Jack, going onto the pit straight, and that was enough to get to the inside line. And in fairness, Nicky Taylor didn't fight that too hard.
The question is, will he make a liar out of me now, Ben Smith? I can guess he's probably going to pull about half a second through sector 1 and 2, and that'll be just enough to potentially stave off an attack from Nicky Taylor, a reply, shall we say. What we didn't take into account in that guess was actually Joel Lask and his sort of ambition to try and get into second place, actually. But look at Ben Smith. He's pulling away those couple of tenths that we thought maybe he had in the locker. We'll see as they come through sector 3 and across the line whether they get pulled back in. But look at it. It's absolutely flying now, isn't it? I was going to suggest maybe, or put that out there into the world, Andy, as a bit of a question, is if you are going for tactics, if you're Nicky Taylor and you're still in the lead of the race, do you just keep going and just keep putting laps in? Even though your tyres are dying, if you're still in the lead, you just stay there until you try and go as long as possible in the lead, and then as soon as you're overtaken, dive into the pits. But this is too early for that tactic now.
Yeah, I think he's now got to just try and stay out there, stay as close as he can to Ben Smith, and maybe go for an undercut himself. But if he's struggling more with tyres, the undercut isn't really a particularly attractive option, is it? Because then you're... okay, you get onto the fresh tyres early, but you have to stay on them for longer, and he's already perhaps struggling a little bit over a longer run. But 1.2 seconds gain, it's going to be more than that, I think, by the time they get to the line. Something like 1.3 or 1.4 seconds gained by Ben Smith. This is astonishing pace, and now Joel Lask will try and repeat that manoeuvre on Nicky Taylor. These two have had a few run-ins in the past, it must be said, but this, I think, should, touch wood, stay pretty clean. Lask is up the inside. He's going to do exactly what Smith did a lap ago. He's late on the brakes. He dives for the apex, and as long as he gets stopped, which he does, he is going to get his Mercedes into second position. So Nicky Taylor, 2 places lost in as many laps, but perhaps more significantly, Jack, he's 2 seconds off the lead already.
Yeah, it's somewhat, I wouldn't say capitulation, that's far too harsh a word, isn't it, given how far away we are from the checkered flag. But Nicky Taylor's sort of race certainly unfolding. He's actually probably quite fortunate that Ogden hasn't been able to stay with these top 3, although he's not that far away if Taylor's form continues. Speaking of poor form, Eric Axelsson, obviously overtaken by Jack Smith now, and he's been able to hold on, Andy, but every time he cuts to him, he's sliding or he's off the circuit.
Yeah, it's coming to him a lot more difficultly. That's a word, isn't it? A lot more difficult than it is for the race leaders out in front. I talk for a living, everyone. That is terrifying. Yeah, Eric Axelsson really looks like he is struggling with the balance of the car. He did, though, set a purple middle sector on the previous lap. So when he hooks it up, he's quick, but that's not what you need in an endurance race, is it, Jack? You need a car that you'd sacrifice a couple of tenths of a second a lap if it means you can hit that lap time every single lap. If you've got a car that's trying to kill you and just won't go through a corner in a safe and steady manner, you might be quick on 1 or 2 laps, but not over a full race run.
Yeah, you want to be the best drivers in endurance racing are not the ones that can put in a 10 out of 10 lap. It's the and only do it once in 20. It's the drivers that can do a 9.5 out of 10 lap, but do it for 18 out of 20 laps, really, because ultimately that's what you're going to be. And that's why endurance drivers do get paid quite a bit. And everybody goes on about Formula 1 drivers being paid too much. Like, granted, they are paid far too much. But you see a lot more paid drives in endurance racing than you do in sprint racing. And personally, I think there is a higher skill level in endurance racing as well. And I know a lot of people might be like, oh, it's not as fun, it's not as entertaining. And I agree. I would prefer to watch a sprint race, I'll be frankly honest. But I can appreciate the skill level is much higher in from both the team and the driver, actually, is much higher in an endurance championship as well. And Andy, I think that's one of the reasons why you enjoy it so much, isn't it? Because all the stakes get sort of bigger and bigger and bigger, even though on the face of it, it's not as entertaining to watch over a 20-minute period.
Yes, I think it is as entertaining, but that's because this is my kind of thing. The trick with a long distance race is you've got to pay attention. You can't just you can casually watch, obviously, because it goes on for quite a long time, but to really appreciate it, you've got to understand the nuance of what's happening in front of you. It's not just a bunch of cars driving around a circuit for an hour and a half or 24 hours in some cases. There is strategy, there's a story, there's a plan, there's an ebb and a flow to the race over the course of the full race distance, and you've got to follow that strategy. And, you know, I've always said, if you're watching long distance racing, I say this to people I'm trying to get involved in NASCAR all the time, pick a couple of drivers, a couple of cars that you like the look of, you know, drivers that you want to support, and follow their progress through the race, because it will instantly become a lot more interesting to you. You're no longer just watching cars driving around in circles for a very long time, but you've got a story to follow, and every single driver at the end of this 90-minute race will have a story to tell, and some of those stories will end with a happy ending, some won't perhaps, but that is the joy of long distance racing. And yet, as far as skill level is concerned, absolutely agree. Drivers who excel at long distance racing, the skill level involved in that, and the stamina and the fitness, the physical and mental fitness that they've got to be able to do it, even in a sim, because as we all know, you work up quite a sweat when you're driving a particularly a high-end sim, which many of these drivers will have. It is not easy work at all, and I've got a huge amount of respect for any driver who can do it.
Absolutely, I think there's a few drivers. Oh wow, that's Lyle out on the left-hand side, stage exit left. I thought a couple of corners there, they were going a little bit wide, but Adam Lyle, unfortunately, then absolutely flies off, and he's finding himself rejoining. I think potentially wants to rejoin down in 16th position. Joel Lask is in no man's land all of a sudden. Andy, Ben Smith. So used to see Jack Smith's name at the top end. As soon as I glance away, I assume it's Jack, but Ben Smith has somewhat buggered off into the distance, hasn't he, really? Over 3 seconds. Joel Lask is sort of wavering in second place. Nicky Taylor is actually being drawn in by Ogden, I would say. I think the gap is 2.5. I think before or previously it was about 3 seconds. Ogden is catching Taylor. Then Jack Smith is catching Ogden. We could have a fight for third place much before we have a fight for second or first.
Well, Jack Smith's an interesting one. Don't count him out of this race, because have you noticed how he's just now, as this opening stint of the race wears on, starting to become a threat? He's within a second now of Jonathan Ogden, so that's for 4th position. Ogden, as we've just said, is only a couple of seconds off Nicky Taylor, and Nicky Taylor was leading the race until a few minutes ago, although he did just run wide there. Jack Smith, exceeding track limits ever so slightly, needs to be careful with that, but he has got good pace. We haven't really seen, I mean, this is the first race stint that we are witnessing. We're talking a lot about the drivers making the difference as far as tyre life and long run pace, but perhaps, Jack, the car might make a difference. The BMW might not be the fastest car out there, but it does seem very stable, doesn't it? And Jack Smith maybe is now starting to reap the rewards of that as far as tyre life goes.
Yeah, you absolutely might be right, to be honest, because that Mercedes looks very slippery to get the maximum out of it, and that Lamborghini looks very much like a Lamborghini, and absolutely flying itself left, right, and centre. Oh, there we go. So apparently, Rich was just telling us that Eric has it set up very loose, but very fast. Has anybody told him it's a 90-minute race? Just asking for a mate. Whereas the BMW, you're right, does look a little bit more planted. We haven't seen much theatrics from it. And that fight for 4th position is about to erupt, I would say. And all 3 different types of cars, Andy. We're about to see the best of every of them.
Absolutely. This is what it's all about. Ogden struggling, Jack Smith in the ascendancy. And in fairness, Eric Axelson doing a good job in a car that does not look nice to drive. Let's be honest, to stay with him. And in fact, Jack Smith almost ran into the back of Jonathan Ogden. Eric Axelson saw a chance to get to the inside. It didn't quite pay off. They've got that's Adam Lyle, I think, just behind them, who has returned to the circuit from the pit lane. He's pitted for repairs, you would imagine, after that off earlier on. And he's got a grandstand view now of this 3-way fight for a position inside the top 4. But again, Jack Smith, he'll want to capitalise now on the pace that he's got at this stage of the race. He wants to get this move done quickly so that he can set off after the podium positions up the road. There's nowhere to pass through the triple right-handers here. It turns 12, 13 and 14. But as we come towards the end of the lap, he'll be thinking about one thing, Jack, and that is a good exit from the final turn and perhaps an overtake into turn 1.
Tell you what, Jack Smith's time is actually, he's the fastest driver in the top 5, isn't he? He's faster than Ben Smith on that previous lap, only by about half a tenth of a second, but he's also faster than Joel Lask. You're right, Andy. He is the man on the mission, and he needs to get through and start making his way up, because we are going to be hitting the pit windows soon. I don't think anybody's actually made one just yet, but we have hit about half an hour. And if your theory comes to light, where, you know, logically, every half hour you come in for a pit stop, then we could be seeing people starting to mix and change it up. As there's a dive to the inside by Oulton to try and overtake some of the back markers. I'm not sure who the back marker is, but Ogden's been held up here, and it looks like Smith tried to go for the wide run, the late apex, to get the best run on him through turn 2. Andy, this is getting very close.
Oh, fantastic racing. And yeah, Ogden was getting a bit frustrated there, I think. Could not find a way past. I think that was Alok Iyengar, maybe. Whoever it was, he couldn't find a way through, and in the end had to force the issue. But Jack Smith is all over him. Jack, we know, is a very, very good touring car racer. He might have to deploy some touring car overtaking tactics here. He's got to force the issue. Defensive line taken by Ogden. Backs up Jack Smith, parks the car on the apex. Brilliant defensive driving that from Ogden, in fairness. The one benefit he's got here is that Eric Axelson's part of this fight as well. If Ogden keeps backing Jack Smith up into the Lamborghini, that could help him. But Smith has got the overlap. He's got the run now. He's got the inside line heading towards turn 9. Not a nice place to go side by side. But in the end, Ogden has to leave the door open, and Axelson may follow him through as well.
Axelson's trying to go around the outside. He couldn't quite get back the cutback for the late apex either. So Jack Smith into the top 4, but Axelson versus Oulton is still raging. I think it's going to be Axelson after Oulton. His run and his momentum is absolutely ruined, but Axelson going a little bit wide. He doesn't really like the curbs as much, or either that or the car can't actually physically get to them. We'll have to wait and see if we have a chat to him afterwards. But it looks like Ogden's going to have to concede this one for the time being. And look, they've got the newcomer, Lyle, isn't it, who's sort of trying to unlap himself. Shouldn't really be getting in the way, though, in this battle.
Well, oh, now was that Ogden heading for the pit lane? I think it might have been. Yes, Jonathan Ogden then heads for the pit, so he's the first of the front runners, if you like, at least drivers inside the top 10, to make a pit stop. And I think part of the reason for this,
Nicky Taylor has.
Oh, yeah, Nicky Taylor. Okay, so erstwhile race leader in. Well spotted that, Jack. The one thing I was about to mention, if we ever had the chance to draw breath, was that Adam Lyle, having made a pit stop, was staying with that group, and on natural raw pace, he wasn't really able to do that before. That is the effect, partly of the fact that those drivers were battling, but also Lyle's on fresh tyres, so there clearly is an advantage to the new tyres. And Nicky Taylor, Jonathan Ogden and Craig Curtis all looking to try and unlock that benefit now. They were almost exactly half an hour into the race. That does tell me that they're going to try and do this on 2 stops and 3 stints of half an hour. Will anybody, Jack, try and do this on 1 stop? Because fuel-wise, I'm pretty confident they could do that. It's just a question of whether they can keep the tyres underneath them.
I'd be astounded, but I'd be very entertained, so I'm hoping so. Because you would probably be looking at the people that are maybe sort of just outside the top 10 then, wouldn't you? Because ultimately they wouldn't be able to go max out pace. They wouldn't even be able to go 9 out of 10 pace, would they? They'd have to be doing the sort of 7 or 8 sort of very smooth laps in completely clean air. So you'd be looking at the likes of potentially a Craig Curtis or a Butler or Dalton Ayres, maybe. It's very ambitious if that is the plan, or maybe people are just going to fall into that tactic regardless because they got nothing else to lose and they enjoy leading the race while everybody else pits. I don't know. It's going to be fun to watch, though, as Ben Smith does lead by 6.4 seconds. That hasn't changed with any of the pit stops. Where has Nicky Taylor popped out? He's popped out in 11th place, Ogden in 13th, so there has been no big undercut, although I'm just having a look. How close is Oulton compared to Nicky Taylor? I think he's still quite a distance back, but Nicky, obviously, with those fresh tyres on, might be enjoying himself a little bit more now.
Yes, I think he may well be. And this is, there we go. So Smith last in. They had to respond, didn't they? Because Nicky Taylor was close enough that a few laps on fresh tyres would put them under some threat. So we now have Jack Smith to the lead of the race. He's got a car coming out of the pit lane just ahead. That's not ideal. John Jones, I think potentially that was, but they both managed to clear him. This then now temporarily becomes the battle for the race lead. And Jack Smith and Eric Axelsson separated by half a second. Eric, I don't know how he's doing this, Jack. I'm going to be completely honest because, as we mentioned, that car looks evil to drive, but he is sticking with Jack Smith, isn't he?
He is. He's doing a good job, and the race leaders are just coming out of the pit lane as these guys are about to go around the final corner. So Ben Smith just keep hold of it, so does Joel Lask, and it's still a big gap. Actually, if anything, it's got bigger under that pit stop period between themselves and Nicky Taylor, as the timing screen will sort itself out, I'm sure. But you're right. I think Eric Axelson's driving very, very well, all things considering, because he did look like he was overheating those tyres quite early in the race. I'm amazed he hasn't come in yet. To be honest, I'm astounded, actually. But if he's got some pace in the car now, what's the point in coming in? You know, if you're currently with the person who is the fastest on old tyres, you might as well keep with him.
Well, here's a theory for you. I wonder whether Jack Smith is thinking about a one-stopper here. Didn't have the raw pace in the early stages, but maybe that was deliberate. Maybe he was trying to look after the tyres. We're only 10 minutes away from halfway, Jack. So if he can keep going for another 10 minutes here, he'll be at the halfway point. He'll save a pit stop. A pit stop's a long time here. It's a long run down that pit lane at a very low speed. Obviously, you're then stationary for a fair chunk of that. Maybe he was A, looking after the tyres, and B, heavier on fuel at the start of the race to try and do this on one stop. What do you think?
Yeah, you could well be right. I'm actually just looking at the times as well, and compared the new tyres to the old tyres, i.e. Jack Smith to Nicky Taylor, and the gap is only about 0.3 of a second through Sector 1. We know that Nicky Taylor is not all that quick through Sector 1, so it's a little bit harsh to sort of judge him on that. We'll judge him over the course of the entire lap. But maybe Nicky hasn't quite got the pace in those tyres to begin with, or maybe Jack Smith just actually does have those long run ability, and that BMW may well actually come into its own. I'm looking for the next BMW. It's Chris Blakey in 4th place on the road, of course. Kai Kagashiwa is in 6th place on the road as Chris Blakey now dives into the pits. So this is all going to change up once more. With a couple of tenths up is Eric Axelson on his previous lap time. There's been some definite stories, and I have to say I was speaking to a few people over the weekend actually about a couple of different sports. Andy, you're absolutely right, of course. There's stories up and down this grid, and stories is really what makes people tune in for sport, isn't it? It's not necessarily to see the fast cars, although that is a big appeal. It's the loudness and it's the drama of it all, but it's the drama of the storyline that really grips people into. It doesn't matter what sport, football, darts, pool, snooker, it doesn't matter, motorsport. It is about that story, and that's why we love it, and that's why we get to know the drivers so well, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. And you know, any sport needs that, really, doesn't it? You need a reason, you need someone to root for, you need a reason to root for them. And the longer that we get to watch them do what they do, the more chance there is that you'll find a reason to do that. And, you know, even if you're watching this and you've just stumbled upon this stream completely at random, you've no idea who any of the drivers are, all of a sudden, the fact that we seemingly have this split strategy going on gives you something to get excited about. And so, you know, people wondering, is this going to work? Is it not going to work? It's going to be a really, really interesting race. That was an interesting line by Sam Milner, and it loses him 6th position because Sam Zero has found a way through. So the top, 9 drivers now, 8 drivers in fact now, have yet to make a stop. So that's your split. We've got the top 9 seemingly going for a one-stop race, the rest of the field going for a two-stopper. So how can we expect this to unfold, Jack? Well, over the next 10 minutes, when this lot eventually pit, they are obviously going to have lost time to those who have pitted and have been circulating on fresh tyres for 10, 15 minutes by that point. The idea is they will gain all of that time back when the others come into the pit lane later on. So it's quite a frustrating way to do a race from the driver's perspective, because at no point in the race are you the fastest car on track. You're not able to really go on the attack and overtake people and move through the field yourself. You're putting all of your faith in the strategy. But if it works out and comes good at the end, then you look like a genius.
Yeah, and I think that is what Jack Smith and Eric Axelson are attempting here, aren't they? Because it's gone past the point of, or maybe they just missed the pit lane once or twice. There is a definite conscious effort here to be doing something completely different. And I said that you had to judge Nicky Taylor versus Jack Smith over the course of an entire lap. Well, we can tell you that there's about a second difference between Nicky Taylor and Jack Smith. If you're comparing the two Smiths, well, we should probably do that in a couple of minutes' time, because Ben Smith has just gone purple in Sector 1. Nobody else is really improving out there. Only one driver, Ben Smith. Even the drivers that have come into the pits, there's only one that has improved in any of the sectors, apart from Keys Willems and Craig Curtis, to be fair, actually, to be fair to them. I didn't scroll down a little bit to 13th and 14th. They've done a Sector 1 and Sector 2 greens, but Ben Smith is really flying, so we can go on board with him now, actually. There we go, and he's going to be hunting down Kai Kagashiwa, but he doesn't need to worry about him. Everyone ahead of him will pit. But maybe Ben Smith has had the same thought process that you have, Andy. Maybe he's thought, if this tactic's going to work for me, if they're doing something opposite, I actually need to get the hammer down as soon as I get the fresh tyres on to try and sort of nullify that effect.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, he's, what's the gap? Maybe 30 seconds or so, I think he is behind the race leaders. So a big old gap. That's a lot of time to try and gain back. But he is flying. Bear in mind, he's 6 seconds clear of Joel Lask. They were first and second in the race before the pit stop. So he's already pulled that gap right out now to a much more comfortable margin. The other interesting point to make about Ben Smith is that we're seeing now Ben Smith unleashed on fresh tyres. He never had this opportunity at the start of the race because he was boxed in behind Nicky Taylor. You know, qualifying is important from that perspective. He clearly had good race pace, but wasn't able to really show it on fresh tyres until now.
I wonder if that's going to be the thing that comes back to bite him come the end of the race. That sort of regret of, okay, he was following Nicky Taylor, and I don't think that was a bad thing. Nicky had some good pace in the early stages, but as soon as Nicky lost that by about half a second, it took Ben Smith about 4, 5, 6, 7 laps to try and get past him, didn't it? And that could be the thing that really hurts him towards the end if there is one of those chasing the time sort of races, which endurance racing quite often is. It's amazing, really. It's, again, another reason why it sort of captivates you and sucks you in almost. Elliot Dalton-Ayres versus Nicky Taylor. Taylor's definitely not going to be in the running for a race win here. In terms of what we can see right now, the picture right now, Andy, Nicky Taylor's dropped off, hasn't he? But Elliot Dalton-Ayres may well be in for a shout for a podium if he can try and get past him and then push on.
And where did Elliot start? He wasn't right at the pointy end. I'm thinking about
he wasn't.
Also, so yeah, really impressive this from Elliot Dalton-Ayres.
I think he was outside the top 10, actually.
He was at one point, wasn't he? I can't remember whether he finished there, but it was towards the middle of the grid, certainly, that he started. Really, really impressive race pace. But we've seen this before from Elliot, haven't we? He's not the greatest qualifier out there, but really comes to life in the races, and clearly, again, has decent long-run pace. And he's starting now to apply some pressure to Nicky Taylor. Ahead of him, Nicky way wide, well beyond track limits there, as he came out of turn number 14, the third of those 3 90-degree right-handers. 49 minutes to go then. We're ticking towards half race distance at the moment. If you're just joining us, Jack Smith leads the way by just under a second from Eric Axelson in second place. Andy Carroll sits third. Josh Martin is in fourth position. Sam Zero fifth. And Sam Milner in sixth position, but none of those 6 drivers have yet to make a pit stop. They are seemingly going for a one-stop strategy, so they're gaining now. They're going to drop back again at about the half race distance. But then after that, they could come back into it. Then you've got Ben Smith in 7th position, started second on the grid, worked his way past Nicky Taylor about 20 minutes into the race, and really has never looked back. He's been quite comfortably the fastest driver on the track. He's just set another new fastest lap of the race, 1:53.960, but he's a long way back from the race leaders. Joel Lask is his nearest rival on the same strategy, and they are separated now by 6.7 seconds. With Nicky Taylor, Jack, what's that, about 15 seconds off the race lead, a race that he led for the first 20 minutes.
That's what I was saying. You know, he's really struggling, isn't he? And I know he said that he was going into this one. He had a fair few excuses loaded in the barrel, didn't he? Nicky Taylor, as he came in for an interview and for his pole position. One of which, obviously, was the fact that he's apparently been bedbound all day. Well, his simulator is in his bed, so I don't really see that as an excuse. Well, that's what it looks like on his webcam anyway, half the time. But also, it's the fact that obviously he didn't do any race running in a championship where it's completely different to anything we've done before. So, okay, he's been ill, fair enough then. But it's a bit of a shame to not see him put that sort, even though he's got the raw pace and he's got that out-and-out qualifying attempt, it's a bit of a shame not to see him try and test the waters in that race distance, see what he needs to do, see what he can do, because in qualifying, it wasn't just one flying lap that he made. He made about 3 or 4, didn't he? And even before those 3 or 4 flyers, he was already pole position for about 12 minutes before that. So he clearly has good 90% pace. Just needs to try and practice a little bit more, and maybe with that pole position will encourage him hopefully to go into the next round and have that practice. So we've got about 2 weeks, I think, until the next round. Plenty of time for people to get on the server.
Yeah, next week actually, but a very different track. Yeah, it is. We don't have to wait that long. We wouldn't make you wait that long, Jack, because this first race has certainly got me hyped up for the rest of the season. So, no, we're going to bring the first 2 rounds to you back-to-back weeks. That's how this is going to work, basically. We would normally have 2-week gaps between our sprint racing championships. Well, those 2 weeks are now filled up with the World Endurance League. So those 2 weeks that our lovely viewers used to have to recover from listening to us drone on for a couple of hours every Wednesday night, I'm afraid afraid you don't have that anymore, but we will bring you some top quality racing to make up for it, and that we have done so far tonight. But yeah, we're off to Imola for the next round of the championship. Very different challenge, really. Well, saying that, quite a few corners at Imola that are quite similar to those that we've got here at Qatar, but I do think the Lamborghinis will perhaps start to come into their own a bit more at what is a very different style of track in general, really, over in the Italian countryside. So we are a minute away from half race distance. What do you think, Jack? Is Jack Smith going to dive for the pit lane this lap? Axelson certainly has lost pace. He's dropped about a second on this lap so far to the race leader. He almost certainly will not be coming in because, as I confidently predicted, they're both going around for another lap. But we have now to be getting towards a point where they'll be thinking about a pit stop.
They've lost about another half a second on that last lap compared to where they were about 4 or 5 laps ago. So, to be honest, I'm astonished that they haven't come in for the pits this time. Maybe they think there is still some time left in the tyres, but realistically, I think if you're going to one-stop it, which is clearly what their ambition is, you might as well do it bang on halfway. It's sort of questionable, really, for me. Maybe they think... Apparently, the setup is actually fully open, Rich was just saying, whereas normally they're sort of, it's pretty much semi-fixed, isn't it, actually, in our championships and everything. But if it's completely open, that means that the tyres and the cars can pretty much react completely differently. But I still think it's slightly strange. Maybe as the car gets lighter on that fuel, they want the fresh tyres to really take advantage of it a little bit later, so they're sort of quite happy with how it's currently going. But I am still quite surprised.
Well, remember, I don't think they can do, and Rich will correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think they can do the 90 minutes on 1 tank of fuel. So they will have to take fuel at some point. It's usually about an hour-ish that you get out of a GT3 car, if it's true to life. So the later you pit, Jack, the less fuel you have to put in at that pit stop. So that saves you a chunk of time as well. So the thinking is, if we're not losing too much time on the old tyres, we're going to save even more time than that by spending less time stationary in the pit lane. Now, I think you can refuel and change tyres at the same time as well. So you'll try and time it so that however long it takes you, those who have practiced this anyway, however long it takes you to change 4 tyres, that's how much fuel you want in. Well, here we get our answer then. It's a lap after halfway, but both of the top 2 cars are into the pit lane. So this is, 46 minutes, let's call that, into the race. Jack Smith and Eric Axelson pit. Where will they come out in relation to the rest? Now, remember, the rest, if they're doing a 2-stopper, Jack, they'll have only put about 30 minutes of fuel in their car, so they'll have had a quick pit stop. They've been pounding around on fresh tyres for quite some time. They're going to have a big advantage, but will it last until the checkered flag? I don't know.
Well, Ben Smith is about to take the race lead, I think, on track. So, yeah, he's going into turn 1 already. Joel Lask and Nicky Taylor. Nicky Taylor's just going around the final corner. Joel Lask has just gone past them. But they all have to do another big, long pit stop. And I'm not sure how long the pit stop is. But with all that fuel, a little top up on fuel and those tyres and everything like that, it's going to feel like an absolute age, isn't it? It's all of a sudden this race has really blown open. We were expecting just 2 pit stops, Andy, weren't we? 2 pit stops, that's your lot. That's what we're happy with, and it's basically an on-track fight from there on. But this inclusion of this little bit of sort of spicy schedule is really very exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing how the next 40 minutes unfold as Josh Martin on the timing screen goes top. I don't think he is top. It's Ben Smith, trust me.
Yeah.
No, it is Josh Martin.
Yes, no, he is. I think is a pit stop costing them a lap? Is that how long they're stationary? Because I've noticed the timing screen earlier on said that Ben Smith was 1.5 minutes off the race lead. So I think it's a particularly long time that they're spending in the pit lane. And I think that's what's just complicating the timing screen ever so slightly right now because, yeah, it is Josh Martin leading the way. And by the looks of it, Smith up into 2nd place. But remember, Martin hasn't pitted, and you can tell he's not pitted because that was a huge slide from the Lamborghini driver. Right, whilst we've got him on screen, he did indeed send me a message a little while ago. Here we go. So, he said, just getting my excuses in nice and early for my massive lack of pace before qualifying. Oh, Josh! Your timing is impeccable. Oh, no. He's collected one of the BMWs as well. That was a big spin. That car was all over the place. He's clearly fallen off the cliff as far as his tyres are concerned.
Oliver Gibbs
very nearly fell off the track as well.
Yeah, sorry, it was Oliver Gibson was the BMW for any Jack Smith fans out there, which I know if you're a Jack Smith fan, you are obviously an Oliver Gibson fan as well. But it's, yeah, I just wanted to clarify that because obviously that was going to be very important for the race lead, wasn't it? As unfortunately, it's very important for Oliver Gibson's race. But equally, it's not a race leading incident, but it's still not one that could have been avoided. Now, it was the excuse you were about to read out there, Andy. Anything to do with the fact that he might spin just as you start to talk about him?
Well, he told me he'd only done 5 laps of practice around this track, but of course that's now slightly out of date. He's done a few more laps since then, but he did say he'd lost all of his settings. So he was running tonight on completely stock Assetto Corsa force feedback settings. That can lead to things like that because, as you know, if your force feedback suddenly changes and you're not used to it, you can lose control of a car in places that you normally wouldn't. But I do think that particular moment was more down to low tyre grip than anything else, really. To answer my own question, I think they are losing a full lap with a pit stop because Ben Smith here is in second place, but was about 1 minute and 20 seconds adrift of Josh Martin, who has finally now done the sensible thing and headed into the pit lane. But yeah, I think they're losing over a lap with a pit stop. That's what's mixing things up a little bit, but it's all about to sort itself out. And Ben Smith is going to have about a 10-second lead, I think, over Joel Lask. Nicky Taylor will be third. Dalton Ayres will be fourth and Jack Smith in fifth, but Smith is now on fresher tyres than the others ahead of him, and we don't think has to stop again.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting indeed, with especially Josh Martin, I think, was trying to copy Eric Axelson, wasn't he, a little bit, his teammate potentially, and going for that longer pit stop. I mean, it might work well for Josh Martin, but if you keep spinning, you pretty much negate all the advantage that you have. You have to be very, very confident that the tyres, and obviously you're going to be able to keep it facing in the right direction for as long as humanly possible. Ben Smith, you're right, 10 seconds in the lead. Oh, there's an ooh there, and what are we looking at?
Well, because we've just added a third name to the non-finishers list, and it's Oliver Gibson, so that must have damaged the car more than I thought it would, Jack.
Oh, that is gutted, isn't it? Yeah, on the left-hand side, in 17th currently, the DNF. It'll start to fall, though, as he gets overtaken by those who are still going around the circuit. And, yeah, you're right, it may have been suspension damage. It looks fairly innocuous. We've seen bigger crashes than that. And quite often in the VRRC, damage is... championship by championship, damage is maybe sort of lessened slightly, because obviously if it's a touring car championship and they're all bashing each other silly, you don't want everybody jumping out on the first lap. But still, it looks like maybe they just hit the wrong corner and the suspension's gone. I'm guessing.
No, I think you're right. Well, I hope. Well, I don't know. It didn't look like a big hit, but it seems a coincidence, doesn't it, that a lap later he's retired from the race. I'm a bit disappointed about that, though, because you score points, I think I'm right in saying, as long as you finish the race. I forget the exact details of the points. Yeah, you do. So just finishing will score you some points. I know you've got a drop score that you can use over the course of the season, but I'm surprised there that Oliver Gibson has just given up the ghost. It's worth, if you're thinking championship anyway, it's worth sitting in the pit lane, getting the car fixed. You might go a lap down even, but you will still score some points. And if Oliver now goes to Imola and gets taken out on the first corner and it ends up being another really bad result, well, that's it. He's out of championship contention because he gave up here. He's going to score nothing from this opening round of the championship. So a bit disappointed to see him retiring from the race, actually. Maybe there's another reason behind it, I don't know. But if it is just because of the damage sustained, that's a bit of a surprise.
So Elaine Gibson, yeah, confirming our guesses that it is suspension damage, which is a bit of a shame because, as you said, Andy, it would have been nice to see him come in and, okay, maybe trailing round at the back. But this championship goes on for a long time. It's the old adage, isn't it? You can't win a race in the first corner, but you can lose it. You can't win a championship in the first round, but you can lose it potentially. And that drop round does give you a little bit of an out. But like, the last round is on October the 9th. You might need that drop round because you're busy on October the 9th. You don't know what you're doing at the moment, do you? So you need it in the locker for absences that are unexpected. So, yeah, a bit of a shame for Oliver Gibson, but hopefully we'll see him back at Imola and having a little bit of a better time. He may well have just been frustrated. We pointed out quite a few times tonight that he's not really been as quick as we come to expect of him. So maybe it's just a bit a frustrating night and he fancied sort of logging off maybe. But, yeah, a bit of a shame.
It is indeed. Right then, we do now have a proper legitimate running order for you because everyone has now made one pit stop, and it is Ben Smith 12 seconds up the road. That is incredible. And Joel Last is no slouch. We know how quick Joel is, but he just can't keep up with Ben Smith in this middle part of the race. Nicky Taylor is third. He's 22 seconds off the race lead. And Elliot Dalton Ayres a further second behind. They're the two cars that we've got on screen now. We're following Dalton Ayres. And the red car up in the distance is Nicky Taylor in third place. But I am much more interested, with the greatest respect to Nicky and Elliot, in the car that's closing in rapidly behind them. That is Jack Smith. Remember, he is the lead car that we think is on a one-stop strategy here. He is 1.2 seconds behind Dalton Ayres, but perhaps more importantly, Jack, he's within 25 seconds of the race lead, and we know that an extra pit stop is costing you a lot more than that.
Do you think, how hard do you think he's pushing here, Andy? Because it's quite easy at the early stage of the race to be sort of level-headed and to, you know, sort of figure out this strategy and to implement it and everything like that. But as soon as you start seeing drivers ahead of you, you start pushing, don't you, a little bit? And if you push, the tyres go a little bit more. And all of a sudden, the end of the race becomes a little bit more difficult. Do you think he's sort of pushing hard to try and get past these drivers as quickly as possible? Because he does look very quick in comparison to Elliot Dalton Ayres.
Yeah, I mean, he's got to try and extract a little bit of pace, I think, at this stage of the race. And he wants to try and work his way through the traffic. He's got fresh tyres, and this is the last time he's going to have fresh tyres for the remaining 35 minutes of the race. So he's kind of got to utilise that, because he knows that in the last part of the race, the others will come back at him on fresh tyres. A very easy move in the end is made on Elliot Dalton Ayres, who I think realised the situation that was unfolding there. He knew that Jack Smith was a couple of seconds a lap, potentially quicker than him, and he simply moved aside to let him through. But yeah, Jack Smith has to utilise this now. This is his time to shine. He's on fresh tyres. He's got good pace. At the end of the race, that situation is going to flip around and reverse. So Jack Smith is going to potentially be losing time at the end of the race. It's all down to whether he will lose as much time by staying out as the others will by making a pit stop. And I really don't think he will. I think he might well be on a winning strategy. Look at the speed he's got now, though. He's pulled a second on Dalton Ayres in about 3 or 4 corners.
Well, that and these drivers that he's actually battling now will be pitting in about 4 laps' time. And to be honest, after seeing the BMW drive past them so easily, they may well be considering pitting now rather than in 4 minutes' time, because realistically, they clearly have a pace disadvantage. But Nicky Taylor is doing Ben Smith the world of favours, actually, by holding Jack Smith up as much as possible. Another question to add to potentially the interview questions afterwards, Andy, is: did Jack Smith's tactics change due to the fact that he had a very poor first and second corner, dropping back down to 6th position? Did he all of a sudden have a different strategy cooked up in his head? Did he have a plan B? Was this plan A? I think that's going to be very interesting to see if he had any of that sort of going on, or whether he just sort of fell into that strategy, this strategy as it occurred. There goes Nicky Taylor. So after holding Jack Smith up for such a long time, Nicky Taylor, oh, well, I say such a long time, a lap. Nicky Taylor now dives into the pits. He's fed up of being slow. He wants the new tyres on.
That was a shorter stint than last time, though. He at least made it to half an hour last time. He probably only did about 25 minutes of green flag running there, so that was quite an early pit stop. But yeah, Nicky Taylor then in, the first to blink, going for an undercut maybe to try and just get this pit stop out of the way. Back to your question, Jack, about whether this was always the plan for Jack Smith. That will depend entirely on one thing. How much fuel did he have on board at the start of the race? If he was always planning on going to halfway, then he would have had more fuel in the car. But if he was planning on just doing a 2-stopper like everyone else, he probably wouldn't have put 45 minutes worth of fuel in unless he did that just as a backup. That's the sensible thing to do, actually, I think. Fuel the car as if you're doing a 1-stopper. And then if it turns out that actually doing a 2-stopper is the best thing to do, you can still pit early, but you can't pit late if you're out of fuel. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's better to have more fuel than you think you're going to need at the start of the race. But what exactly he did, well, we know he must have had plenty of fuel on board, because he went the full 45 minutes without a pit stop. But yeah, whether he did that as a backup plan or as his original plan, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, well, if he had that 45 minutes of fuel in and he decided to pit early as well, if that was the strategy for maybe a few others out there, obviously then you take less time in the pits actually fueling up, don't you? So you maybe save yourself a couple of seconds there. So yeah, I would say that's the erring on the side of caution, and probably the one that I would be aiming towards as well. But with 32 minutes gone, we haven't seen Ben Smith come in. He is setting illegal sectors, so he's gone a little bit wide. He's pushing the limits as far as he can. Currently about 2 seconds off of his fastest times. He's just done a 1:56 dead which is, as I said, 2 seconds slower than his ultimate fastest time of the entire race. And that is the fastest time anybody can muster at this race. Eric Axelson is the other driver to be keeping an eye out on. Is that Dalton Ayres driving to the pits?
It was indeed. Elliot Dalton Ayres is in then, so he goes just under an hour, about 58-59 minutes that was before his next pit stop, and Axelson can breathe a sigh of relief because that was a pretty tasty battle that was going on there, but he's now got some nice clean air, and the Lamborghini not looking too slow at the moment. He has dropped 4 seconds back from Jack Smith though. Remember, he was staying with Jack in the early stages of the race. I confess, I didn't notice whether that was the gap when they came out of the pit lane or whether it's grown since this stint began. But Axelson, either way, you can see a little way now back from the DK Power BMW, which continues to close in. It's now within 10 seconds of Joel Lask. I made a note on a spreadsheet that I just quickly knocked up, Jack, of the gaps roughly after everyone had made their first pit stop, so just after half race distance. And Jack Smith was 25 seconds off the lead. He is now, by my reckoning, about 22-23 seconds off the race lead, so he's gaining a little bit on Ben Smith, but Ben Smith is in a different league, really, isn't he?
He's absolutely flying, even though he is slightly slower than he has been in previous sort of sectors. Ooh. Here is Ben Smith. He's going to be held up here, though, as he's got a battling pair of Mercedes in front of him, and he does manage to get through, but that will certainly have held him up slightly, and I think Lyle's about to hold him up again. Lyle does dive sort of semi out the way to let him go through. That won't be helping Smith at all. It may well be something that Jack Smith will come across, though. There's obviously some back markers. In fact, look at Lyle. He's actually got a really good run. If this was actually for a legitimate race lead, what is Lyle doing? He's going for the move, and Smith having to defend. He's going to be absolutely fuming in the car there.
I think that supports our theory that Ben Smith's got a high downforce setting, though, because Lyle was like a rocket ship behind him. I don't know where the other car was going there, but anyway, that will thankfully...
That was Darren Butler.
Yes, thank you, Darren Butler, going well off the road. Meanwhile, this is Jack Smith, again, negotiating a back marker that I don't think is defending from him. I think it's just moving out of the way. BMW helping out another BMW. In fact, that lapped Beamer was carrying a bit of damage there by the looks of it, wasn't it? So Jack Smith in the end easily getting through. 8.5 seconds now back from Joel Lask, but we are fairly certain that Lask will be going to the end. Now, one thing won't be going to the end, I should say. One thing I am not an expert on, Jack, and I realise this is probably more of a Rich question than a you question, but how easy is it to tweak your pit strategy mid-race? Can you change how much fuel you're planning on putting in when you're actually out on track? Because that would allow drivers to adjust their strategy on the fly, if you see what I mean? Or is it one of those where you set your pit options before the race starts? I've not really done any pit stop racing on a set of courses, so not something I'm aware of. But if they can't, yes, Rich, I believe is here.
Yeah, I'm live as well. So the drivers set their pit strategy before the race. They've got 3 pit strategy slots that they can set. But what they can also do, as they're driving into the pit lane, a pit strategy box pops up on their screen, and they can make adjustments to that as they're driving into the pit lane. Okay,
so if, for example, Ben Smith or Joel Lask originally were planning on 2 pit stops, when they pitted for the first time round, they decided, actually, no, I want to try and go to the end now. They could choose to put more fuel in at that first stop.
Absolutely, yeah. So they can change the tyre pressures, and they can change the fuel strategy. They can also repair the car as well.
Interesting. Right. Thank you, Rich. See, I knew we kept him around for a reason. Thank you very much, Rich, for that. That's useful information. So that's interesting then, Jack. So drivers, even if they maybe haven't chosen to do it on this occasion, they do have that option to adjust their strategy on the go, as you would be able to in real life.
Yeah, which is quite nice, isn't it? What they don't have, as you would have in real life, is someone almost making that call for you.
Yes.
A team strategist, as you will. These guys will have to be doing that whilst in the race, whilst trying to figure out what everybody else is doing.
Oh.
As we just heard that, who was that pitting in then? Oulton?
Ogden, yes. I heard Ben Smith, but I think it was Jonathan Ogden. Yeah, Jonathan Ogden in. Nicky Taylor's just on a purple middle sector, by the way. Remember, he's on fresh tyres, but going to the end now without another pit stop. So Jonathan Ogden then choosing to make a pit stop. I haven't seen much of Jonathan in the second half of the race, Jack, but a really impressive first showing. It's going to be interesting to see where he shakes out at the end of it all.
I'm hoping he joins us for the minis. And I'm hoping quite a few of these join us for the minis as well. The likes of who we saw at the beginning. It was it Christchurch? Church House, sorry, Church House, Tom Church House. Lee Piercy, who we haven't seen that much of. He's operating currently in 20th place. Unfortunately, we haven't seen much of Lee Piercy as one of the new drivers on the grid. Keys Wilhelms, I believe we've actually spoken about Keys before. So he has sort of split. Yeah, he's been in an LMP race apparently. So Adam Lyle as well, who's currently operating in 6th place due to, I think, only coming into the pits once. But we've seen him spin before, so I'm not sure if Adam Lyle is actually in 6th place or 8th place even. Anyway, it's very impressive for the newcomers. I'm hoping they join us for another couple of major championships, even if it's, as I said, in the minis and then, or if it's just in the World Endurance League. Hopefully they keep coming back.
Oh yeah, 100%. We're always happy to get new drivers on the grid. Joel Lask, by the way, dives for the pit lane as well. So we're starting now to get into that final round of pit stops. Interestingly, a lot of them trying to stretch it a bit longer this time, aren't they? Axelson. Axelson's in. No, that I didn't expect. Ooh. Eric Axelson, we thought was going for a one-stopper. He had faded in that particular portion of the race, and he's decided to come in and pit again. That was only about... That was less than a 20-minute stint, Jack. I'm not sure what's going on there.
No, I was going to say that was pretty much bang on 20 minutes, wasn't it? Nicky Taylor set the fastest lap of the race by 0.2 of a second, which I was going to sort of point out before. It's very impressive, but not the most peculiar thing that's happened in the last 30 seconds, because you're right, Axelson coming in it sort of trumps it, really. Jack Smith is in the lead. Andy Carroll in 2nd place. Joel Lask is in 3rd in terms of what you can see. In terms of my timing screen, it's a little bit different. This is not the problem. This is the complicated bit about endurance racing, isn't it? And it's to keep your eye on every single driver, especially if you're commentating on it.
Yes, one thing you must never ask a commentator to do is think. We're better at just speaking without thinking, and that is much easier. But it's doubly confused by the fact, and I don't think I've yet had a definitive answer on this, but I do think they're losing over a lap by pitting, which is why I don't understand why they're not all doing a one-stopper. If that is the case, I don't see the benefit of doing 2 pit stops in this race. But looking at the gaps on the timing screen, those gaps on our timing tab, worth pointing out, are the gaps between one car and the next car. So it's not, so Chris Blakey sat in 3rd place. He's not 33 seconds behind the race leader. He's 33 seconds behind Andy Carroll. So if you go all the way down to Ben Smith, who is 4.1 seconds behind Sam Zero, but Sam is 2 minutes behind Eric Axelson ahead. So that there might be a little bit of a timing glitch in there, but I do think they're losing a huge chunk of time from coming into the pit lane, and that means it could be difficult potentially for Ben Smith to even break into the top 5 come the end of the race. But Andy Carroll up there in 2nd position, he's running well. Remember, he pitted just after halfway as well, so he's on the same strategy here as Jack Smith. So that is a genuine 2nd place at the moment for Andy.
It is actually, isn't it? And he's just done his 10th lap on these tyres, the same as Jack Smith. So yeah, but exactly the same strategy for the Lamborghini in front of us. And with 23 minutes to go, it's whether Andy can drive smooth enough to keep his tyres under wraps. And Chris Blakey is been in the car for 15 laps. So it's more than likely that he's had needs a 2nd stop or final stop. More likely, anyway. I'll tell you what's also harder to make it harder for us, Andy, is having 2 timing systems that give us different outcomes. Ben Smith is in 5th. In fact, they line up now actually. So Ben Smith in 5th place, Sam Zero in 4th. But Ben Smith, what's his lap times looking like? In sector 1, he's only about 10th quicker than Jack Smith through sector 1, and that's the area that we've been saying that Ben Smith has been so hot on it every single race. It's going to be a monumental effort, you're right, to try and claw back into the podium.
But I'm not reading this wrong, am I? Sam Zero is a full lap behind the car ahead of him, which means that Ben Smith also is a full lap behind. Is that how you read that?
I'm nodding along.
The blind leading the blind is the phrase that springs to mind here. I think that's what that means. I really do. I think Ben Smith has dropped a lap by pitting, because it's such an extraordinarily long pit lane and then you're stationary for a long time. These cars, remember, GT3 cars, they don't refuel quickly. It can take a minute sometimes to put a full tank of fuel in. Now, granted, they're not putting full tanks in, but it takes a long time, and that's the big flaw, really, in this strategy, if you ask me.
So, Jack's, sorry, I was trying to figure out the track map because it's also made harder with the track map and you have two Smiths and they only show the first 3 letters of the last name. So they're both SMI. So Ben Smith,
Ben Smith just crossed the line.
Ben Smith just crossed the line. Jack Smith is 2 corners ahead of him on track. And I'm guessing, well, according to this anyway, yeah, a full lap. So Jack Smith is on 34 laps. And Ben Smith is on 33. And of course, the general rule of endurance racing is the most amount of laps completed when the checkered flag drops, isn't it? Jack Smith is currently winning that race and winning it overall. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. Ben Smith is well behind.
Yeah, well, there we go. I think lessons will be learned tonight by drivers and commentators alike as to what the winning strategy might be, because it's quite clear that the one-stopper is the way to go. Now, this is a genuine pass for position here. That's Ben Smith past Sam Zero for 4th place. The question now then becomes, what can he realistically get out of this race? Well, 4th place, I think, is the answer. He's 1 minute and 19 seconds behind Chris Blakey. As quick as Smith is, I don't think he's going to gain 1 minute and 20 seconds nearly in 20 minutes of racing.
It'd be very exciting if he does. The top 3, arguably, will they have to stop again?
No.
Ben Smith, Jack Smith, I sort of semi-doubt it. Andy Carroll and Chris Blakey, I would also doubt it, but that is the only thing that could throw a spanner in the works at this point, isn't it, I would argue. It just looks like Ben Smith, for all his hard work early in the race, you're right, just ended up on the wrong strategy, as did most of the grid. It has to be said, it's not a Ben Smith isolated incident.
No.
Most of the grid, probably about 75% of them, all fell into this strategy. And here goes Ben Smith into the pits.
Now, is this a penalty? Is this track limits related, maybe? Because Ben Smith has been pushing the issue with that. He's back in the pit lane again. Look, now, let's see if he stops in his pit stall. If it's a track limits penalty, Rich, that would be a drive-through or stop-go? Drive-through. Okay, so if he drives all the way through, this is a penalty. If he stops, he messed up his fuel numbers, but I think he's driving all the way through, so that is a penalty for Ben Smith, and that is heartbreaking. He's back behind, he's behind Eric Axelson, most notably. Blakey and Sam Zero, he might have had half a chance of getting back past, but he's dropped, according to the timing screen, 6.5 seconds behind Eric Axelson. That is a bitter pill to swallow for really the most impressive driver as far as raw pace is concerned in this race.
One thing we can take away from this, Andy, is the fact that after teasing him all of last season, we do know that Ben Smith can mix it, can't we? If anything, he's extremely quick. So it would have been fascinating to see. Well, I think, to be fair, if they all on the one-stop strategy, he would have won. I don't think there's really that much against that, is there? If everybody was on the same strategy, Ben Smith was in the prime position. Just so happens the race hasn't gone that way. It'd be interesting to know as well the difference between the drivers who did a lot of practice of long running. Andy Carroll, I think we heard, did 300 laps, Rich, was that right? Yeah, so 300 laps Andy Carroll did, so he must have got some long running in there. I wonder if Jack Smith did, and I wonder if the others like Chris Blakey and Sam Zero did as well. And comparison to the likes of Ben Smith, Joel Lask, Nicky Taylor, they all potentially didn't do as many laps. They just assumed, as we did at the beginning of the broadcast, Andy, that every half hour it's logical to come in.
Well, and it's one thing to do lots of laps. Who practiced pit stops? Who realised that it was going to cost you a lap to make a pit stop? I'm sure there are some drivers out there who didn't know that until they made their first pit stop in the race, and they're sat there for 2 minutes thinking, what on earth is going on? Why can't I get going again? So I'd be fascinated. I absolutely guarantee we'll rock up at Imola next week, and no one will try and do a two-stop strategy. I guarantee it, because it quite clearly isn't the way to go. But I would put some good money, I think, Jack, on the fact that Ben Smith certainly had not done a practice race pit stop and had no idea that that wasn't the right way to do it. And I don't think he's the only one who fell foul of that. It's cost him, obviously the penalty has cost him even more. Ben Smith, why can I not see Ben Smith? Why is Ben Smith 14th? He's dropped back even further. Has he pitted again? What's going on?
That is a brilliant question. I'm trying to figure it out as well. I'm having a look at the incident report on our little ticker. I cannot see anything that's potentially happened. I don't think it's an incident. What about the pits? Where is he? He's 14th, isn't he? It's been 4 laps since he's been in the pits, which is, of course, that drive-through penalty.
I think that...
but that brought him out in about 11th. It brought him out in 8th place, didn't it? So the 14th is a new predicament that he's found himself in. 34 seconds behind Kai Kokoshiwa. I would be very fascinated to know if anybody in the YouTube chat has actually been keeping up to date with that, and if anybody afterwards, i.e. Ben Smith, if you're on our Discord, slide into the DMs and let us know what on earth happened.
There are 3 options. 1, it was a timing glitch, and that actually is how much time the drive-through lost him. 2, he's had a moment on track, which has cost him more time. Or 3, we've just not been paying enough attention, and I think that may
Probably
well cover
3.
it. I think perhaps a combination of the 3 perhaps explains what's gone on here. But Ben, I'm sure will let us know. He's dropped us all messages in the past to tell us what's going on. I think he'll let us know. Yeah, Rich is erring on the side of it may have been a timing glitch, which I hope it was, because that exonerates us all from any blame in not knowing what happened. But either way, he's down in 14th place. It's not really much of a consolation to him right now, is it? Because, well, he's not going to really have any time to gain anything back here.
No, he's not. So we might as well sort of have a look at some of the other drivers that we haven't mentioned that much, I suppose, actually. Jonathan Ogden, we've mentioned quite a lot. He's currently labouring down in 9th place. But Sam Milner is a driver I'm quite impressed with. Andy, again, flown under the radar slightly. But he's on the same strategy as Jack Smith. Currently in 8th place. Done himself a really good job. Keys Wilhelms is also in the top 10. Actually, Keys Wilhelms has been on the different strategy. He came in 6 laps ago. So he's on that 2-stop, operating in the top 10. Really very impressive. Kai Kokoshiwa, we rarely see him quite as far up as 12th place either. So there are some really impressive drives out there, obviously taking advantage of some drivers that maybe haven't had the times of their lives, like Josh Martin, for instance, Oliver Gibson, and others. But it's still a very impressive top 10 showing from a fair few drivers.
It is, and that leads me to an important question that, for once, we've actually got some time to discuss on air, and that is who we think the driver of the race should be. I mean, with a race where strategy has been all over the shop, it's quite difficult to pick one, isn't it, really? Of the, well, I mean, Jack Smith, for being the best of the one-stoppers and the one who really made that strategy call work the best, is a good shout, but don't forget Andy Carroll's on that same strategy as well, and a second place finish would be a brilliant effort for him. And yeah, really seeing him on the podium is a rare occurrence, Jack.
I was about to say, I know Rich has just chimed in with his opinion as well. The man on your screen right now personally is my driver of the round, for the fact that every time we look at Eric Axelsson in that Lamborghini, he's sideways. Now, that's not saying that Eric is slow or anything like that. Every time we look at Jack Smith in any championship, he's pretty much leading the race. It's a story if he's not. Andy Carroll normally takes about 3 or 4 rounds to warm up into a championship. He's come in, he's done 300 laps. We're going to give him the credit of he probably practiced the pit stops. He probably practiced the long runs. He's done all his preparation properly. And he's driving the car damn well as well. Okay, it might not be 1 lap as quick as Eric Axelsson, but he has also, I think, taken just the same amount of pit stops as Eric Axelsson. He's on the same tyres, and he's driving it a lot more consistently. So for me, Andy, for those reasons, he's my vote.
And I struggle to argue with that, honestly. I think Sam Zero in 4th place is also
that is true. That is well above normally where we see Sam Zero, and give him a great shout out.
Exactly, yeah, and only 3 seconds behind Eric Axelsson. I think he'd have taken that if he'd have offered that at the start of the race. But yeah, I think Andy Carroll has done a magnificent job, hasn't he? There's no getting away from that fact. But he always seems to do this in longer races. Remember back when we used to do the really grueling double distance 40-minute races? He always came out on top there. Anytime you introduce pit strategy, Andy Carroll seems like he's in his element.
He loves a wild card strategy, doesn't he? And I think obviously it's worked for him today. And I can't remember where it was actually. It's one of the American circuits, wasn't it, when we did those double distance races where he decided to try and go as long as humanly possible. And back then, 2 pit stops was the norm for a 40-minute race or something. It wasn't Sebring, no. I can't remember what it was. That's going to really annoy me because it's one of the most famous American circuits.
Road America?
Not Road America. I will Google it in a second. I'll Google it in a second. You're going to say Daytona and start listing off all the oval circuits. I mean, yeah, Andy Carroll does seem to always like a wild card, and it works out for him every so often. But not just that, I do think he's driving superbly as well.
Yes, no, he is. The car looks planted, doesn't it? And his lap times are pretty good as well, really. He's did a 55.8. There's only 3/10 slower than Jack Smith, and Jack Smith's pretty good, as we've seen over the years. So yeah, Andy Carroll really impressed with this. Eric Axelson's a full lap behind him, so he's not going to catch. Sam Zero sits in 4th position. Nicky Taylor 5th. Could he catch Sam Zero? Yes, is the answer. He was nearly 2 seconds quicker than Sam on the previous lap. So Nicky Taylor for 4th place is doable, and he's reasonably well clear of Elliot Daltonairs. Yeah, 5.8 seconds. So Nicky Taylor's had a proper yo-yo race here, hasn't he, Jack? He led the first 20 minutes, dropped down to 3rd, pitted. We didn't see him for about an hour, and now here he is in the top 5, chasing down 4th place. I think he will be reasonably happy with 4th place if he can get there by the checkered flag, given all of the things that he told us after his qualifying run, very impressive qualifying run as well. I think Nicky Taylor, 4th place, he'll take that.
Yeah, I think he should be fairly happy. And I'm glad you actually mentioned my name halfway through that, because I was Googling American race circuits in an attempt to get it off. It was Road Atlanta, for anybody wondering. So, yeah, it was. Nicky Taylor has been doing a brilliant job in terms of the second half of this race, the last couple of laps sort of thing. Yeah, okay, it didn't really go his way after about 20 minutes, did it? But can we put that down to a bit of illness, maybe? Or maybe just tune the tyres up? Shall we give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he learned the car very quickly and he learned the circuit and how to deal with the endurance racing?
I think that's a very diplomatic way of putting it.
I think it is. I'm very good at sitting on the fence.
He would agree with that, I think, and I think lack of practice. Honestly, the one thing we've really learned from tonight is that you need to practice this. You can't just turn up on the night and wing it, because there are so many more elements that go into doing well in this kind of racing. You've got to obviously have your strategy down, know the ins and outs of how that operates, but also you've got to have the consistency, the stamina over a 90-minute race. The rhythm that you get from doing 300 laps of practice means that you can then fall into that natural rhythm of race pace once the green flag flies. You're not sort of still in a sprint racing mindset. You've done a few long runs. You know how the car's going to react at the end of 30 or 45 minutes as Nicky Taylor goes in very hot to turn 1. He'd just gone around the outside of one of the lapped Lamborghinis and perhaps found himself going a bit quicker into turn 1 than he expected. But yeah, so much to practice. Even as commentators, I think we've got to make sure our head's in the game to follow exactly what's going on in these races. You can't just turn up and make it up as you go along.
No, you can't. Every single endurance championship is different as well, Andy, isn't it? Especially if we come to sim racing, because you can put any rules you want into it at all. For instance, most of the time, if we came to an endurance championship in real life, you wouldn't be able to fuel and do your tyres at the same time, would you? Anything like that. So it's one of those things where we have to learn plenty, and obviously the drivers potentially were slightly surprised at some of the rules, but I'm sure they would have been given a full breakdown of the rules and driver briefing and everything. But yeah, I reckon even Rich probably found some things to bring up the next driver's briefing before next week.
Yeah. That's interesting. So Rich also reminding us, I don't think the guys at home heard that, he didn't. I didn't want to repeat what you'd said. Yes, he did a bit of pit stop coaching in the week as well. How many drivers, Rich, turned up to that? Well, half.
Are they the half that are winning by any chance?
Yeah, okay. A coaching session on car setup and pit stop strategies. So was Jack Smith there, Rich? Okay, I was going to say.
To be fair, does he need it? No.
Actually, there we go. So Rich can't take all the credit for what has been a fabulous performance this from Jack Smith. We slept on him, Jack, in the early part of the race. We thought, no, he's not got the pace for whatever reason. Things aren't clicking. Maybe he's not liking the track or the car or a combination of the two. And here he is, 8 minutes from the checkered flag, 16.5 seconds up the road from everyone else. A typical Jack Smith result. It's just the way he got there surprised us a bit.
I think he'll probably be a little bit exhausted after this one, to be honest. And I think normally we sort of chat to him and he's fairly relaxed and he's pretty cool, calm and collected. I reckon after this, he'll have known he's been in a race. It's been mentally exhausting for him as well, because that's potentially the biggest thing about endurance racing on the sim, isn't it? It's the difference, especially between the sprint racing, what we do normally, in comparison to this, where the 20-minute sprint racing, physically, when we talk to the drivers, they're pretty tired. The endurance racing, they'll again be more physically tired, but the mental the mental sort of power you have to go through and the longevity you have to be thinking on top form. There's so much more. It's not just going quickly. It's also, as we said before, trying to figure out what the other drivers are doing, trying to figure out what's best for you. how much fuel are you doing, how much fuel are you burning off each and every lap, how many percentage of the tyres on, and all that sort of thing. When you don't have a strategist, when you don't have somebody helping you, it becomes an awful lot harder. And so I reckon at these interviews, I wouldn't be surprised if quite a few of them sound a little bit tired.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that is the hardest thing actually about sim racing in long distance racing in particular, because you have to do it all yourself. You don't have a team back in Brackley telling you exactly what to do and when to do it and how to do it. You've got to think on your feet. You've got to, be adjusting all of these things and doing the calculations in your head. Can I get away with doing this? How much fuel should I put in? Blah, blah, blah. And again, the more preparation you do pre-race, then the better prepared you are for that, quite clearly. And Rich explained earlier on that you have those 3 strategy slots that you can put in. Well, those who have done lots of practice and preparation, they'll have selected 3 different versions of their race strategy that may or may not arise during the 90-minute race, and they will be able to adapt. And that, again, is something I'm sure the drivers will learn as we go on through the rest of the season. But interesting stuff, certainly. Here is Nicky Taylor. Nicky Taylor is catching Sam Zero, as we said earlier on. Sam is the car just ahead, I think, the blue and orange BMW. That would be for that 4th position. That's the carrot dangling on the stick, and Nicky Taylor's got 5 minutes and 20 seconds to try and get there.
Well, Nicky does often perform at his best when there is a carrot at the end of the stick, isn't it? So when there's something to chase down, he sort of turns it on. In recent championships, he's been able to sort of, once he gets into the lead, actually push forward, whereas maybe in the early stages of VRRC, of his career at VRRC, we quite often found that when he got to the front and he didn't have anything to chase, he would slow up a little bit and he wasn't able to pull away. He is able to pull away these days. But with the front bonnet of Sam Zero flapping about the place, it almost reminds you probably of a Ginetta Junior, Andy, there, where he's terrified of it flying up in front of their face every so often.
That's the least of your worries, honestly, if you're watching a Ginetta Junior race, or any junior race, quite frankly. But Sam Zero, we do enjoy watching the teenagers out on track, though. It's a very exciting form of motorsport. And I'm going to have the pleasure of covering 2 of those junior championships this year, actually, with Ginetta changing organising clubs. But anyway, that's another story. Sam Zero is going to have some defending to do here. How much defending do you think he will do? There's no doubt Nicky Taylor is faster, but with 4 minutes to go and a potential 4th place up for grabs, I wouldn't blame Sam for getting his elbows out here.
Well, on the last lap, Sam Zero was 1.3 seconds slower than Nicky Taylor. He's already going defensive, maybe trying to break the toe.
Yeah, breaking the
toe, in all fairness. Nicky Taylor's not worried about that whatsoever. He knows he's got the pace. As you say, with 4 minutes left, that's about 2, maybe 3 laps, probably 3 laps, isn't it, to go before we actually finish the race. I wouldn't bet my house on Sam Zero coming in 4th, put it that way. But I think still a top 5 would be a worthy effort for Sam Zero. He'll probably be slightly disappointed if he does concede this this position late in this race. But ultimately, with a damaged car, he should be very, very happy.
Yes, I think you are correct.
Nicky Taylor did qualify pole. Let's keep that in mind as well. Yes. It's not the disappointment to be overtaken by him.
No, exactly. And we know how strong Nicky is anyway. And I think he will be a force to be reckoned with this season. You know, we often say, don't we? We make this point every championship, I think, that you don't win a championship on your good days. You win a championship on your off days. And Nicky Taylor's having a not terrible off day here. He's done no practice. He's not feeling well, etc., etc., etc. And he's still going to finish 4th, more than likely, unless he trips over Sam Zero in the final couple of laps. So that is not a bad day. And if that's as bad as it gets this season, he'll learn about the strategy. He'll learn about the tyre management. He'll put more practice in, you would imagine, for the rest of the season. Title contender for sure. Absolutely.
You know, I'm very interested to see how he flicks between the front-wheel drive mini. I'm interested to see this on the entire grid, to be honest, as well, though. But the front-wheel drive mini, straight back into the Endurance Championship, into the next championship, and all that sort of thing. Obviously, lots of laps done by Andy Carroll. Will he do the same amount as the for the minis, or will he prioritise the World Endurance League because he's done so well? These are all things that sort of maybe we're going to have to be encountering with this sort of new format that VRRC are running, and that's quite interesting, I think, as well. It's who potentially people prioritise this, that, and the other. And Rich, I don't know, actually, just let me know. Are the servers open for both constantly, or will, once the Endurance League 2 rounds are finished, the minis will open? the Mini takes over. So once the Mini Championship starts, people won't be able to practice the Endurance League. Offline, yeah, there we go. So the server won't be live, but you can do practicing on an offline environment, which obviously might not be quite exactly the same as what we come to race in, but it's still valuable laps to be put in, Andy.
Well, there is a benefit to doing that as well, which is that your opponents can't see your lap times. So that's, I believe actually the DK Power pairing didn't do a huge amount of laps in the VRRC server, but you'd imagine they must have done some practice away from that because, well, one of them is leading the race and seemingly on course for a race victory. Now, is Nicky Taylor on course for 4th position? He's caught Sam Zero. There is a gap up the inside. He's clearly got more pace, and I think Nicky Taylor's going to go through. Sam's going to stand his ground on the outside, though. That's nervy stuff for Nicky, but he's just about through. He's not quite cleared the BMW, though. We're about to turn right again, and that should do it. Nicky Taylor up into 4th position. He's not going to get any higher than that now. 14 seconds behind Eric Axelsen as he is. Sam Zero drifting wide. Nicky Taylor just straight up drifting, coming off the corner, but he has found 4th place, and Sam Zero gave it a good go there, but just wasn't able to hold on to the position. 40 seconds to go, though. That means we're on to the final lap, and Jack Smith 17 seconds up the road from the rest of the field. This has been a magnificent performance. Didn't lead the race, really, for very long until the second half of it, but by playing that different strategy, going for the one stopper instead of the two, Jack Smith is on course for another victory, and the others must be thinking, well, I thought we had him tonight. It looked as though we were quick. It looked like we were going to get a race victory. Not tonight.
No, and I think, to be fair, he would be a lot of people's driver of the round if it wasn't for the fact that he does it so often. We would probably be giving him driver of the round, but it's almost a curse and a blessing, isn't it, with the fact, although he's had a fair few driver of the round medals posted to him in the past, hasn't he, and a couple of championship trophies as well. So I don't think he's going to begrudge it too much, but he has been superb. It's been a turn up for the works. It's been a surprise for us, potentially a surprise for him, Andy. I am fascinated to know whether this was the plan all along, or whether it did change after a slightly disappointing qualifying or a disappointing start to the race or anything like that, or if he just found that the pace just didn't drop off. So what's the point in coming in? Well, all that to come in the interviews, of course. But himself, Andy Carroll, who will be our driver of the round, I think we haven't decided against it since mentioning it. So, and Eric Axelsen, of course, who we thought at one point was driving really erratically, but at the end of the day, he's going to come home in 3rd place. So what do we know, Andy?
I took the words right out of my mouth, Jack. What do we know? Jack Smith, we know, is one corner away from claiming the checkered flag, though, and starting his World Endurance League campaign in the perfect fashion. He exits the final corner. The DK Power BMW is going to be victorious once again here at Qatar. He swerves towards the pit wall to celebrate with the imaginary team, and he is victorious in the opening round of the championship. A brilliant performance. The one-stop strategy, quite obviously, at the end was the way to go. Andy Carroll, though, back on the podium for the first time in quite a while, and he's going to be arguably even happier with that 2nd place driver of the round. A good haul of points. Not a bad start to his championship campaign, it has to be said. And then Eric Axelsen, as it happens, coming through pretty soon after, although he's a full lap behind the top two. Photo finish there with his teammate Josh Martin, who did not make the podium, unfortunately, 20th and last of the runners, but a solid finish there for Axelsen, whilst Nicky Taylor is, in the end, the best of the two stoppers in 4th position. Nicky reasonably pleased with that, I think. Then it's Sam Zero. Sam Zero in the top 5. That's a feel-good story as well. Quite a few of them, actually, at the end of that race, Jack.
Yeah, that's what I was mentioning before. It is quite nice to see a lot of drivers who, well, to be fair, we didn't even follow that much during the race, but still cracking into the top 10 of some of their best results that we'll have seen, and especially the likes of the newcomers. Jonathan Ogden, first time in the race, first time at VRRC, coming in 6th place, and arguably, if, as I said, the strategies had all been figured out previously, could have been well within the top 5, but 6th place is still pretty good, and obviously it comes at the sacrifice of his teammate a little bit. Keys Wilhelms, we've mentioned him before a couple of times in the LMPs and stuff, but he's in 7th. Chris Blakey in 8th, Sam Milner 9th, and Kai Kagashiwa. There's loads of feel-good stories, and that's what we love about this sort of interim championships that sort of break up the main ones. Ben Smith is going to be the driver who's probably most disappointed with that one, Andy, and I imagine we'll probably be hearing from him in the Discord soon.
Yeah, exactly. So lots to unpack after our opening round of the World Endurance League. We will have our top 3 drivers in the commentary box on the other side of this quick break. Well, our opening round of the World Endurance League is complete. 90 minutes of action, intrigue, strategy, some great wheel-to-wheel racing as well out there. And in the end, quite a familiar sight at the top step of the podium. But it was still a race that gave all of our top 3 finishers lots to talk about. And the time has come to have a word with them. Starting with Jack Smith. Jack, congratulations. Perfect start to your World Endurance League campaign. We've got a few questions for you, but first of all, want to ask you, was that always the strategy to go for a one-stop race, or did that sort of get adapted after what wasn't an ideal start to the race for you?
I'll be honest, I didn't actually have a strategy
Ah.
going into the race. Literally the day before was the first time I'd driven the car, so I'd been so busy doing other stuff that I'd never had the chance to sit in it. So I did about 13 laps yesterday, getting acclimatized to the track and the car and stuff, and then came into today. And I heard Eric say he was trying to do a no stop. I was like, okay, so it's possible so you could like do as little stops as possible. And then someone else mentioned that the pit stops were really long, and I was putting 2 and 2 together. And then I just sort of drove as hard as I could for the first stint and see how bad the tires got, and they lasted until 45 minutes into the first stint. So I thought, yeah, one stop, let's just do that and see what happens. And then I managed to overfuel as well on the second stint, so I ended up with 20 liters of fuel in my tank by the end of the race. But
okay. Yeah. Anything else you can tell us that makes that win even more impressive? Because it really doesn't sound like a race you should have won, really.
No, I was a bit confused. I don't like at one point I was behind Ben, and then Ben pitted, and then I thought, oh, he'll be right behind me by the end of the race, and then all of a sudden he was 13th, and I don't really understand what was happening. And then Andy was behind me, and then it got to like 10 minutes remaining. I was like, okay, so what's happened here? So yeah, it's a bit confusing, but I'll take a win if that's how it's happened. But yeah, yeah, I guess accidental good strategy there won me the race, but yeah.
Only certain drivers can accidentally win a 90-minute endurance race, Jack. That's pretty impressive. Is this the kind of racing that you enjoy then, and that you've done much on before? We've obviously seen you do really well in things like the Touring Car Championship before, but endurance racing, pit stops, strategy, tyre management, is that stuff that you've done a bit of before?
Yeah, I've done a few like 24-hour races, maybe like 4 Le Mans races, like on different sims and stuff. But yeah, I sort of go into this sort of flow state in endurance races. So it gets to a point where I just do laps and then all of a sudden the race is over. So that's kind of what happened midway through that. And I think I was just pumping in like 1 minute 55s every lap. So yeah, it just gets to one of those points and then I'm flying. So yeah, I really enjoy these races. It sort of gets me in the zone, and yeah, it's really good.
Obviously, now a bit of pressure on your shoulders because, accidental or not, you won the race. You're leading the championship now. We've got Imola in a week's time. Bit more practice perhaps to be done before that one?
Yeah, I'll definitely be able to do a bit more practice for the next one. And I think Imola is probably quite a bit of a better track than this for these cars, especially. So, yeah, I'll be definitely doing a bit more practice, especially now that I'm, I've gone and accidentally won it. but yeah, I'll definitely put more practice in and actually come up with a strategy next time. But maybe going in with no strategy is the better option. I don't know, but I guess we'll find out. Yeah.
Absolutely. Cut to Jack finishing 15th in him. I think he knows what he's doing. But, yeah, good stuff there, Jack. Congratulations. We certainly weren't surprised to see you at the pointy end come the end of the race. I'm sure it won't be the last time this season. Well done, though, on the race win.
Cheers, Andy.
So Jack Smith then claims an accidental race win, and Jack Oliphant is now about to catch up with someone who I don't think accidentally found himself in second place, because Jack, as we discussed during the race, this is a driver who always seems to excel in this kind of racing.
Yes, it is Andy Carroll. Andy, massive congratulations on that second place. I agree with Andy McEwen. I don't think that was accidental, was it?
No, but it was a bit depressing hearing Jack say he just turned up and decided what strategy he was going to do.
I put that in the Discord in our little broadcast chat. I was like, doesn't it just make you sick, people who could just turn up and be that good?
I did so many laps and so many different setups and trying to figure out whether one stop was quicker than two stop. And I spent literally like most of the last 2 weeks trying to figure out how to get this thing round there in one stop. So yeah, but
well, I have to say, Andy,
nonetheless,
we were particular. I mean, if anything, it's the moral victory that you've just gotten there, isn't it? Which I know doesn't mean anything in points, but it's still great. Ultimately, you drove it to a T, so that was for you completely planned out, wasn't it? You executed your plan to perfection.
Yeah, I actually went slightly better. Well, better than I thought, because when I'd done, race stints in the practice session, by lap 23, it was getting a bit dicey on the tyres. But this time out, they actually seemed to stay in a bit better. And obviously, having some cars in front of you sort of had quite a lot of wing on, so it was a bit of a, it wasn't great down the straights, but having a few cars in front of you now sort of meant the lap times were a bit more respectable, and I didn't seem to be burning through the tyres quite as quickly. So, yeah, by the time I got to sort of halfway point, it was the tyres were only just starting to go off, which was nice. So it was quite a good feeling to sort of get halfway and not have binned it yet. So yeah, I was quite pleased with that. And I thought I don't know what happened with Eric. Maybe I don't know if he got a drive through or something, but very pleased to end up ahead of him as well. So I'm never going to complain if I lose to Jack Smith. So.
Well, I was quite interested in this, and this is almost a note to Andy McEwen to ask Eric about this in about 30 seconds to a minute's time, is what kind of setup was the difference between your Lamborghini and his Lamborghini? Because obviously they did look on track like they were completely different cars, to be honest. So you're saying yours was set up to be quite stable, but lacking the straight line pace?
Yeah, I did lots of testing, trying to get the tyres to last, and I found that the key to that for me was to make sure that the rear didn't slide around.
Right.
So yeah, I put an extra bit of wing on and took out some toe and camber and stuff just to make sure that they weren't moving around too much at the back.
It worked pretty perfectly, Andy, I have to say that. And because we were so impressed, and because you did put the dedication and it wasn't an accident, we also, and your driving prowess, of course, we have actually decided to give you the driver of the round this time, man, because it was so impressive to be hustling that Lamborghini around and to have planned out that strategy and everything like that when nobody else really thought to do it, or not many people thought to do it. So big congratulations for that. And I know it's not quite the point victory, but you never know. A medal is still nice.
I'll take it. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Andy, and we'll hopefully speak to you next week.
Hope so.
Amazing, fantastic stuff. Always nice to catch up with Andy Carroll, isn't it? Who comes home a very happy second place. Right then, let's chat to our third place driver, shall we? Eric Axelson. I'm going to immediately touch upon what Andy just said about his car feeling quite stable. He had lots of downforce, lots of grip. You didn't seem to have quite so much grip every time we cut to you, Eric. Did you go a different way on setup?
Yeah, I guess I did. I had like almost the lowest aero setting. It was pretty much like a setup for, when I am at my practice, I only hit 3 lap stints. So when going out in the race, after like 20 minutes in, I realized this is going to be tough. to make it work for like another 25 minutes. Yeah, it became really slidey there after about 20-25 minutes in. Yeah, I was sliding around a lot. Yeah.
Which potentially led to a bit of track limits being exceeded. We don't know if that's the reason for your drive-through penalty. Perhaps you can tell us.
You're absolutely right. So I started to slide around a bit, and I couldn't drive the car as I wanted to drive it fast. So I have to adapt to the car and the loss of grip, especially in the rear. And I started to run wide, and I had a few cuts, and I had to pay the price.
It's such a shame, though. In the end, it perhaps didn't cost you too much, though. You would probably have finished second behind Jack, so you've only finished one place lower than that, even with that extra trip down the pit lane. As frustrating as it is, at least you picked up some good points. And now we head to Imola next week. What do you think your chances are there of repeating a podium? You'd have to imagine that others will now start jumping on the one-stop strategy, so it's going to be more competitive at the front. Do you think that you're still going to be able to finish in the top three?
That has to be my plan. Imola is it will be much closer racing, I think, and it's going to be tough. Yeah, but I think the track suits me more than this one, at least. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'll do my best.
We always expect that of you, Eric. I'm sure be speaking to you again in the near future, but well done on the podium. Yeah, we'll see how you get on next week.
Thank you, Andy.
So there we go. Top three drivers, differing stories to tell over the course of the 90 minutes. Pretty sure I said that's one of the big attractions of endurance racing, Jack, and well, it all played out over the last 90 minutes, didn't it?
Yeah, it was sensational, to be honest. And I think the likes of a track like Imola, which is a little bit more well known, shall we say, for a lot of these drivers, because we've done quite a few races there, and where we've just been, it's going to be spicy, and hopefully there might be less of a learning curve, because we've done one now, we've settled into it, everybody knows the game. Let's get into Imola, some proper hardcore racing almost. Plenty of overtaking opportunities. It's going to be really fun. Another 90 minutes, and yeah, it's going to be sensational.
And far more unforgiving than the LaSalle circuit as well, that's for sure. Yeah, I think today the big talking point was strategy. I think next week everyone's surely going to go for the same strategy, and it will just come down to a straight race. And that excites me, because remember how close it was in that first half an hour before the pit stop sort of split everybody up. It was genuinely bumper to bumper racing, and you'd expect more of the same. Make sure you join us next Wednesday at 7 o'clock in UK time, that is. May differ if you're watching elsewhere around the world, and we will bring you another 90-minute thriller. But for now, a big thank you to Jack Oliphant, to Rich Hayden, and to all of our drivers for helping to put on a fantastic show. We've all really enjoyed the opening round of the World Endurance League. We get to do it all over again at Imola next week before we head into our mini sprint racing championship. Lots of racing coming your way here at the VRRC, and we'll all be back to talk you through it.